techniques outlined in this one lesson. Not everyone in today's world is interested in this form of instruction since they haven't yet realized its potential or the necessity for it. As you work to live out this teaching, you may contribute to that awakening by having applied philosophy conversations with your friends, neighbors, and everyone in your sphere of influence. Lesson 15. Knowing ourselves. Spirit, consciousness, and matter. The journey and identification. Consciousness, an interplay of force between spirit and matter. Moving from the world of emotion to the world of mind. Lesson 15. One of the most difficult tasks that a person can undertake is to know oneself. Nothing else in this world presents so much mystery and question as the riddle of identity or the inner reality of humanity. Yet the seeker in all times has ever been admonished by the sage and the adept to know themselves. We seek knowledge of the stars, the atom, and the world in which we live. We seek for wealth, position, and power in that world, or we seek for some measure of comfort and escape from pain. Yet all of these avail us little if we are ignorant of our own constitution and nature. We know our name and address. We know that we are of the species Homo sapiens. We have a limited idea of how we look on the outside and how we feel on the inside, but what do we truly know about ourselves? Of what are we constituted, other than the elements that make up our physical body? From where did we come and where are we going? Who can understand the miracle of conscious awareness, or of mind and the thinking process, or of life itself? These are a few questions out of many that most persons shrink from asking because these often arouse a sense of insecurity, of anxiety for that which is unknown. The very wondering about life might bring the death they unconsciously fear, for life itself is so unfathomable. Though the mystery seems impossible to solve, it can be known and understood in the light of truth. It has been stated that the truth shall make you free, and so it shall, but we must seek it out first. Humanity is first of all a spark of divine fire. We are, at the very center of our being, a focal point of spirit that is a part of that life in which we all live and move and have our being. Secondly, humanity is a radiation of consciousness that emanates spherically from the spark, as soul. Thirdly, humanity is a state of consciousness inhabiting an organized body of energies and forces at the periphery of that radiating sphere which we call soul. The appearance is defined as a personality. It is an aid to the understanding to realize that the word personality is derived from the Latin root, persona, which means mask. When the consciousness which is soul is identified with its body of appearances, it is persona-oriented and identified. It is limited to the outer periphery of its being, a prisoner within the energies and forces which constitute that body, and separative in its nature because the body appears as a life separate from all other lives. The periphery itself is threefold in nature since it is in a sense a reflection of the threefold nature of humanity, the divine entity. Thus, the spirit is reflected into a mind nature, the soul into an emotional nature, and the substantial matter aspect, which gives the divine spark form, into a physical body. When the consciousness begins its journey back into the Father's kingdom from whence it came, it turns inward toward its own center of being. Thus, its awareness turns from the purely physical to move into and experience the emotional aspect of its nature. This is where humanity is today. With the inward movement from the emotional into the mental aspect, we become consciously aware of the process. We are now enabled to aid it via the wielding of our will. In the mind we begin to identify with that emanating life which we are in reality, the soul, and to look toward the divine spark which is our spiritual identity in the one life. For a time there is a conflict resulting from the old habits rooted in the nature of the persona and persona identification and the truth of the soul which overshadows us and demands to be embodied. We are torn between the pairs of opposites as they are reflected from our own inner sense of duality. That is, we undergo a period in which we are both a persona and a soul, so our dual consciousness reflects itself in our life and affairs as the pairs of opposites. The struggle between good and bad becomes very pronounced, if a doctor Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Psychology results from an established habit pattern of repression, when the conflict is kept below the level of conscious awareness. It is into this area of the periphery, the mind nature, that humanity is moving today. As the consciousness abstracts its identification from the form nature of the periphery, i.e., persona, it identifies as soul and becomes so conscious of that divine spark which he is at the center of his being that he is transformed into the Christ who is one with the Father and all life. The above description refers not only to the individual but to the collective life of humanity as well. Conscious awareness as self, wherever it might be found, is always the result of an interplay of force, relationship, between spirit and matter. It is, therefore, an expression and evidence of God. We have only to lift our awareness from the form nature or matter aspect with which we have become identified through our physical sense perception, to the unseen but sense spirit which indwells the form, in order to know God and our own relationship to Him. Our task as aspiring souls is to develop, through evolutionary growth, a spiritual perception which will give us evidence of that which we cannot perceive with the five physical senses. Thus is our spiritual security born to carry us the rest of the way into the Father's kingdom. Cyclic concentration and meditation over a period of days, weeks, months, and years upon the symbol given in this lesson, and its meaning, will aid sincere students in their search for truth. However, until and unless they are ready and willing to discipline their consciousness to live in the highest truths known, and to discipline the form nature to embody those truths, such a procedure would be unsafe. If there is not a sincerity of purpose and a complete dedication to the Christ, there is extreme danger in following such a path. Once the consciousness reaches the mind and begins to identify as soul, we symbolically enter the hall of wisdom. That is, we have entered into that area of mind which holds the knowledge of spiritual truth, and that area of consciousness which holds the wisdom to use truth for the good of humanity. Thus, our spiritual education really begins and we learn how to manipulate the energies and forces of the three lower worlds, mental, astral, emotional, and physical, through our own threefold instrument to create desired effects in the outer life and affairs. You are in the process now of moving from the world of emotion into the world of mind. What will you find when you arrive? 1. An easier identification as consciousness rather than as a combination of thoughts, feelings, and body. That you, the conscious thinking I, are the soul will begin to take on more meaning and you will gradually begin to perceive the world through the newly opened eye of the soul, as such, with greater understanding of the inner meanings behind the outer happenings. 2. That you have a will and can gradually learn to manipulate the forces of your bodies. You will begin to understand that the will is an extension of spirit into your mind, and that through its right orientation and its right use you can consciously create your own effects in the substantial world of appearances. 3. You will finally discover meditation as the modus operandi of the soul, and you will gradually learn to use it as easily as you use speech or any other faculty which you have developed. Here is perhaps the most rewarding of all your findings, for through meditation God is known, the mystery of the creative process is unraveled, and the self is perfected into the true Son of God. Contemplate these findings as a new way of life, and imagine yourself living that life. What will it mean to you as an individual, and what will it mean to your associates? Consider your relationships and imagine what effect you would produce upon them as a soul-conscious Son of God. How would you greet the various happenings of the day, the reaping of seeds sown in the past, and finally how would you meet death? These are questions well worth the asking as you reach the top of your mountain. They are questions you will take with you into the world of mind and their answer as you commune with life and its intricate design. To live every moment to the fullest, extracting from every experience the essence of wisdom, knowing that will to good which fills the heart with joy and the mind with love, is to live consciously. To do that we must awaken, and we awaken only as we move inward with the fearlessness to seek. Dare to question that life in which you live and move and have your being. Lesson 16. The Mountaintop. The Dark Void Beyond. God, the Father, God, the Mother, and God, the Son. The Ajna center. The center in the head. The silver and golden threads. By now you should have reached the top of your mountain, awaiting only the final step into the beginning of a mental polarization. This lesson constitutes that step, therefore, give it your special attention, carrying out each directive as it is given. What do you find after the long climb? Look out and observe the scenery. It would seem that you are standing on top of the world with the hills and valleys stretched out far below. In the distance there are farms and villages, streams and rivers, and far away there are oceans and cities. There are those whose shoulders are stooped with the burden of living and others whose song reflects the joy of being alive. There is the world peopled with millions of human beings, all alone within themselves, locked within a prison of flesh and thought and emotion, the grave of the spirit. Yet, here and there that spirit burns up bright and a light radiates from a point within the prison to reach out and touch other points. By this light we are joined, but most of us are afraid, and burrow deeper into the mass of darkness surrounding us. Dimly, down through the clouds you can see that place from which you have arisen and those whom, it seems, you have left behind. Now look up through the vast expanse of sky to see the sun shining down upon you. You see first its golden hue, but as you look you note its steady blue center like a great all-seeing eye and the orange corona which leaps far out into space around it. The eye is magnetic and seems to be calling you and you yearn toward the sun, but there is only space between you, and no way of passing through it. You are filled with despair, for here within your vision is a promise of eternal life and wisdom. Here is the resurrection of your soul from darkness into light, yet you are held from it by the gulf of space. As you look, the space becomes dark and you draw back troubled and afraid. The sun still beckons. It is clearly visible, yet between you and the sun there is a dark void. In your heart you know what that void is. It is your own fear, the darkness of your own ignorance which stretches out before you to bar entry into the saving light of the sun. Knowing this, you take a firmer grip upon yourself and look steadily across the void into the blue eye of the sun. And from that eye, in the space between, a pathway is formed of silver and golden threads of light. It is so narrow as to resemble a razor's edge, and over this narrow bridge you must cross the void. Suddenly, without consciously taking but one step, you are deep within the heart of the sun, and here you know reality. Here is the humanity you thought you left behind. All humanity is one, for here is the one life that reaches deep into the heart and mind of everyone to form their soul and give them sustenance. This is Christ, who has given himself to the cross of flesh so that humanity might live. Here are we, brothers in Christ, and yet, in that dim dark world, we know it not. Here is God, the Father, God, the Mother, and God, the Son. Here is the good, the true and the beautiful, that life in which we live and move and have our being, and in which we are one. Just as suddenly, you are back again upon your mountain top, standing on the brink of the void with the narrow ribbon of silver and golden light stretching out before you, knowing that it is your task to cross it step by step. Later, much later, you will discover a deeper, more profound meaning underlying this tiny thread of light, but for now you know only that it constitutes the pathway out of your own spiritual ignorance into the wisdom of your soul. The mountaintop symbolizes that center between the brows, which will be your first home in the world of mind. Here you will take up your residence, consciously learning to live in your head. We call this center between the brows the Ajna center, and it is from this point of focus that we are enabled to control the forces of our instrument. From here we look out upon our world with a clear vision of it as it is in reality, free of the cloud of emotion which occludes that reality for so many. With such vision, the automatic response mechanism can be brought under control so that our responses to our environment are premeditated to produce the greatest good for the greatest number. It is impossible to become emotionally disturbed or out of control while one is poised in this center. Learn, when emotional reaction threatens to engulf you, to stand steady in the Ajna center and there to contemplate truth. The sun, which is shining high above the mountain top, symbolizes your soul, but at the same time, because your higher self knows no separation, it symbolizes the soul of all, of humanity, that life which is indwelt by the Christ. The soul center does resemble the sun, but it is not, of course, found within the frequency of physical plane substance. It is located in a much higher frequency above the top of the head where it overshadows the personality. It is, however, reflected into the very center of the head, as a small golden sphere of light resembling a tiny golden sun, when the personality begins to aspire toward the soul. As the personality continues to seek truth and endeavors to apply that truth in its daily life and affairs, the overshadowing soul infuses the personality with its energies via this reflection of itself in the center of the head. Please understand that this center does not truly exist until the personality, through its own effort, begins to invoke the attention of the overshadowing soul downward. As it does begin to come into being, the wisdom of the soul pours into the mind and brain of the personality, and we gradually become enlightened. The vast expanse of sky between the mountaintop and the sun symbolizes the area of mind that must be bridged by the aspiring personality before we can be born again in the consciousness of the soul. It becomes a dark void as we contemplate it, first because it is unknown and secondly because we fill it with the terror and the ignorance of our own subconscious. We experience a glimpse of our higher self in the kingdom of God. We know for a thrilling moment the joy of promised fulfillment, and then we see that dark void which we must cross. In the midst of our despair, as we fasten our gaze upon the heart of the one life, out of which our purpose comes, a pathway is formed. It is made up of a silver and golden thread of light so narrow it resembles a razor's edge. The silver light is that of the Christ as he reaches out to aid the aspiring disciple. The golden light is of the disciple's own consciousness as he goes forward to join his life to that of Christ. John 11 verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. Along this narrow path we must find our way across the void of our own mind into full waking consciousness of ourself as the Son of God in the Father's kingdom. You will note that the term disciple is used in the foregoing. This is because the aspiring personality has become the disciple of the Christ the moment it reaches out with its own consciousness to cross that void. The path in the mind is reflected outwardly in the life of disciples as they apply the teachings of the Christ to their everyday affairs. It is a narrow edge they walk in the world, yet it is so broad as to include every human being as their brother. Pause now for a few moments and focus the consciousness in the cave of the heart center as you have been doing each morning in your meditation. Visualize the center between the brows, similar in appearance to the heart center, with the exception that it is a golden yellow in color, and think toward it as the new center of residence within your body. Then visualize the tiny golden miniature of yourself in that center and focus your consciousness there. Poised in the head, in the ajna center between the brows, contemplate the following concept for a few moments. I, your name, a son of God, integrate the forces of my body, emotions, and mind to aspire to my Father's kingdom. Let there be light upon my path. Then spend a few moments radiating light and love into and through your environment. Do this meditation exercise each morning at a regular time and endeavor to conduct your affairs throughout the day from the Ajna Center focus. Lesson 17. Choosing and directing one's thoughts. Will force, the mental plane. Working with cause, white and black magic. The forked path of decision, aligning with the forces of light. The measure of one's will is one's ability to choose and direct one's thoughts according to a known purpose. Every person can think to a greater or a lesser degree, but few people there are who have developed the necessary will force to choose what thoughts they shall think at any given time. These few have realized that the individual's thought life is the blueprint of their outer world, that the forms created in mental substance are the patterns upon which their everyday life is fashioned. This is a difficult truth to realize, for the thought life can seldom be seen with enough objectivity to relate it to those happenings that are the natural effects of it. The mind struggles to comprehend its own laws and to train itself in the right use of those laws. This is the problem of the person who is learning to live from a focus within the mind. During the past, these people have been the victim of thought, rather than the originator or manipulator of it. From their emotional polarization they have operated according to a set of laws which function and can be applied only in the frequency of the emotions. Now they find themselves growing up out of the emotional life into the beginning of a mental polarization which is for them a no man's land until they learn its laws. The old ones with which they have been familiar for so long, and which they have learned to manipulate to their own benefit, more or less, are no longer available to them. They are very much like people from America, who in England, suddenly find themselves driving down the wrong side of the street. They and others in close proximity to them are in extreme danger because they are violating a traffic law of this new country into which they have entered. In another way they are like adolescents who suddenly find themselves between two worlds. They have taken on an adult stature while they are still child enough to be unfamiliar with the feelings and the ways of the adult. Their predicament is painful and very real, for they do not belong. They have to make a place for themselves, and they can do this only by learning those techniques that are of the adult world. The mental plane is that area of creative substance that is causative to the physical plane manifestation. People who live in and direct their affairs from this frequency of substance work with cause rather than with effects. This is the basic difference between the person who is mentally polarized and the person who still lives within an emotional focus. The latter is constantly challenged by, and must work in and with, effects. Causes are for the most part unknown to them, and they are a victim of circumstance. What they will do is always dependent upon an if. If such and such a situation is favorable, they will be able to accomplish their goal, etc. The individual who has become mentally polarized does not depend upon the if in the working out of their affairs. They create those conditions and circumstances necessary to the working out of their plans and purposes through their manipulation of cause. They set cause into motion from mental levels to manifest the effects in emotional and physical substance, which they choose to manifest. It must be remembered, however, that they do this because they have learned how to do it, not because they have simply grown into it through an unconscious process of evolution. A person becomes mentally polarized through conscious effort to do so. They learn how to manipulate the laws of the mind through a conscious study of those laws, and a period of self-imposed disciplinary training in the application of them. Thus, they initiate their own growth into a new level of spiritual understanding. Working with cause has been labeled as magic down through the ages because the results appeared to be brought about by superhuman or unnatural methods. We continue to use this term magic, but we give it a different meaning. To those of us who are familiar with it, it simply defines the creative process as that process applies to a person's life and affairs. Magic is the manipulation of the divine law to produce an ordered series of effects in time and space. There is, of course, a positive and a negative application of such activity since the pairs of opposites always manifest within the life and affairs of human beings. There is a white magic and a black magic. There are white magicians and there are black magicians. As we enter upon the path of mental development, we choose via our attitude and our actions that which we shall be. White magic is the manipulation of the divine law to produce a series of ordered effects in time and space which manifest the good, the true, and the beautiful for humanity. The white magician is concerned with those effects that relate to the betterment of humanity as a whole. They are disciples of the Christ. Their purpose is to serve the Christ life that both overshadows and indwells humanity. They either have embodied or are earnestly trying to embody the principle of selflessness that results in harmlessness of intent and a positive goodness of action. Black magic is the manipulation of the divine law to produce a series of ordered effects in time and space which manifest the separative goals of the magician. The black magician is concerned with him or herself and their own rise to power or the accumulation of material gain. They care nothing for humanity, but set themselves apart from both God and humanity within the shelter of their own ego. People who place their feet upon the path of mental development move either to the right, toward white magic, or to the left, toward black magic. They are confronted with the forked path of decision as they make those many small choices having to do with the routine of daily living. They are learning the creative process and establishing those patterns in mental substance which direct the weight of their creativity toward the forces of light for the betterment of humanity or toward the forces of darkness for what they think is personal gain. The major decision contained within a lifetime of small choices will affect their life and affairs for many incarnations to come, for they are building patterns of action, tendencies, likes and dislikes, etc., into their instrument, which will be carried over into the next incarnation as a part of the so-called inherited characteristics. These will affect the inner state of consciousness to be born into flesh until such time as experience teaches that consciousness that it is a part of the Christ life. It can easily be seen, then, that this particular phase of the evolutionary development, the beginning of mental polarization, is a most important one. Here in this cycle of growth a person sets into motion causes that affect their life and affairs for many incarnations. Such individuals set their feet upon the path that shall make of them a Christ or a devil insofar as their influence upon the world is concerned. This is a concept to be considered deeply. All consciousness evolves into a more perfect expression of that which it is in intent. While the divine intent of humanity is the expression of Christ, a person can, and many do, refuse to accept this destiny. When that happens, the evolutionary development is on the dark side, and we see the rise to power of a person like Hitler. Such ones form their own separative intent, and cut themselves away from the purpose of the one life. What great and almost inexhaustible karma is the person's whose evolution brings them to this place. To have been the vehicle for the precipitation of the painful or enslaving karma of a mass of people, even though they may have earned such an experience, carries with it a retribution almost impossible to contemplate. How much better to have been the instrument through which the saving grace of the Christ is precipitated to the masses. An illustration from the life of Christ was, having spent 40 days fasting and praying in the desert, he was taken to the top of a mountain overlooking Jerusalem. Satan spoke to him saying, "All this can be yours if yet, it must be remembered that neither is the result of one lifetime. It takes many incarnations of evolutionary progress to develop the destinies of each." Hitler gained his rise to power and became a focal point through which the dark forces were loosed upon humanity only after many lifetimes of evolutionary development. Many centuries ago he stood where most of you now stand upon the forked path of decision. His many small choices were made in favor of himself as a personality, and while they did not appear important at the time, they eventually led to that incarnation in which his influence was so great as to precipitate a world war and untold suffering for millions. In the next few lessons you will be given the rudiments of the science of cause and effect. You will learn how to wield energies from a focus of the will in mental substance. During the next few incarnations you will become consciously creative to a degree impossible to imagine at this time. It would be wise to pause during the coming week and give deep consideration to the decision your attitudes and actions will constitute during the remainder of this lifetime. Let your decision be a conscious one, made with an open eye to the eventual consequence it will bring. Align, through the direction of your thought, with the forces of light as they are wielded by the Christ, and invoke, through prayer, those forces to guide you in the small choices which make up this major decision. Set your feet, you bow down and worship me. And Jesus replied, "Get thee behind me, Satan. Do you think I came down the ages to rule an anthill for a day? Firmly upon the right-hand path, dedicating your creativity to manifest the good, the true, and the beautiful for those with whom it comes into contact. To distinguish between the two paths, the left-hand path spirals energetically downward into denser matter, whereas the right-hand path spirals energetically upward toward a developing consciousness of the one life." Lesson 18. Why energy follows thought. The creative process. The law of polarity. The law of magnetic control. The law of precipitation. Thought form building. One of the first laws of the mind to be grasped and understood by the seeker is a simple one that most of you have heard many times. Energy follows thought. This is a fundamental truth which carries many connotations that must be understood in their entirety before people become the masters of their form nature or their own fate. Before we can begin to comprehend those connotations, we must learn why energy follows thought. What are the more recondite laws behind this one which make it a fact in nature? Exactly what process takes place when mental substance is formulated into thought? Thoughts are intangible since we cannot see, hear, taste, touch or smell them. We can only think them, and so to most individuals thoughts have no foundation in reality. Yet, they constitute the causes back of all that we experience in the outer world of happenings. Before there is experience, there must be consciousness formulating thought within a mind which will direct energy into the form of experience. Thus, we see that all experience or any experience is the direct effect of a thought life. Which then is closer to the reality? The mental plane where cause is set into motion, or the physical plane where the effect of thought takes on an appearance to the physical senses of a consciousness incarnate in a physical body? The three recondite laws behind the fact that energy follows thought can be defined in the following manner. 1. The law of polarity. When the polar forces of will and mind are brought into a relationship with one another, the creative process begins. A magnetic field is created within the mind by that polarity. 2. The law of magnetic control. When a magnetic field is created within the mind and maintained there, mental substance is set into motion in the pattern dictated by the will. A thought is born via the magnetic control of substance 1. 3. The law of precipitation. When a thought is born, a triangle of precipitating energy has been brought into juxtaposition with time and space. One of the 7 cosmic laws, introduced later in Lesson 32 states, the energy of love in the mind produces right understanding. The magician, regardless of whether aligned with the white or dark forces, must consciously appropriate and wield these 3 laws in order to create a predetermined circumstance or situation in the magician's life and affairs. Please realize that this is not theory. There are today, as there have always been, those in the world who live alone by the creative process described above. It is a part of the evolutionary development that all people eventually experience. The time is coming when the entire race of humanity will demonstrate this aspect of the divine heritage. Man was created in the image and likeness of God. We are, therefore, creative in our likeness to the Father. A concept may be inserted here for later contemplation and meditation. The will to be, focused within the mind of God, created the first thought of self. Thus did the conscious thinking, I, come into being. People who are just endeavoring to become mentally polarized are confronted with the necessity to understand these 3 major laws having to do with the creative process. They must create. They must begin to dominate their form nature and the environing circumstances of their life, because this has become their inner nature. They can no longer accept the rule of an unpredictable fate, for the nature of the consciousness polarized on mental levels is to create and to control their own fate. The consciousness then seeks knowledge through study, meditation, and experiment. They will experience both success and failure, both pleasant and unpleasant results of their endeavors, until eventually they evolve into full knowledge of magic and the ability to apply that knowledge in their life and affairs. Their influence will be for good or bad according to their own motive, and they will reap their rewards accordingly. Because so many have reached that place in the evolutionary process where they stand at the very door of this development, knowledge regarding it is being made readily available in response to their conscious and unconscious demands. This series of instruction is added to the many others which are making an appearance all over the world today, in an effort to help guide the seeker along the path of spiritual endeavor. It is hoped that in this way some of the dangers confronting seekers can be brought into their perspective, and that their decision regarding the right or the left-hand path can be made in full knowledge of what they are doing. The creative process as it applies to the mentally polarized human being is described here with enough clarity that anyone truly desiring to use it may learn to do so. At the same time, the student is warned there is a right and a wrong use of it, as there is with everything else. The repercussions of either are much greater than any you have known in the past. The choice is yours, the responsibility of that choice is yours, and the effects created in the future by seeds sown in the present will also be your own. The formulation of thought, which is the first act in the creative process, takes place when a consciousness brings its will to bear upon the mind. It is wielding the law of polarity. Will in use is nothing more than focused intent. According to the ability of the individual to bring an intent into focus within their mind will be determined their degree of creative potential. Consider what happens in the mind when people begin to establish creative control over their life and affairs. The first and most natural effort will be toward the establishment of order within their life. They will usually choose to right some wrong because it is defective or unpleasant, within themselves or their environment. If they have a chronic illness, they will naturally attempt to produce a healing of it. If they do not like their job, they will try to create a better one. If their relationships bring them pain, they will either try to right them or to seek new ones. They must realize that the condition they do not like is the result of their own thought life. Somewhere in the mind they have focused an intent to manifest the very situation or circumstance they are endeavoring to change. While they may not be able to get at the original reason for the focusing of such an intent, they can, nonetheless, realize its presence in their mind. When they do this, they can, through a determined effort, cancel out the old intent with a new one. A woman who suffers from chronic arthritis enters upon the path of mental development and decides to heal herself. As she studies the laws of creativity, she realizes that she must have focused the intent to manifest this illness within her body or she could not be experiencing it. Such a thing seems impossible, for she certainly does not consciously want to be ill. However, since she does not really know the truth of the concept, and cannot, until she applies it, she decides to prove or disprove it in practice. If she is rightly guided, she will consciously build a thought form of perfect health manifesting within her body, by focusing the intent to manifest health within her mind. The first response of the mind will be to contradict such a thought. After all, she is a sick woman. She can feel the pain this moment. She can look at her hands and see with her eyes that they are crippled with arthritis. She knows or thinks she knows the medical facts which deny her ever being free of this disease. How then can she be so naive as to sit and think of perfect health in this body? For many this will be the end of the effort. They will have failed before they have really begun. For some an emotional faith in God will still the doubts and permit the new intent to remain in focus. These are the individuals whose emotional natures are devoted to God and can readily accept His mysterious power. For a very few the contradiction of the mind to the newly focused intent will be a challenge, serving to strengthen her determination to carry out her purpose. She will realize that the doubts are the result of the old intent to be ill. She may not know why or how that intent was formulated, but she will recognize its presence and, through such recognition, gain the strength to defeat it. She, too, will demonstrate faith in God, but it will be of a different kind than that of her more emotional brother. She will know not only the power of God transcendent, but the power of God immanent. She will realize that she has inherited the creative faculties of her divine parent and is meant to use them. Within her mind she will become a well woman by focusing and maintaining her intent to be one. Emotionally she will gradually become a healthy person as she accepts the precipitating energies of health into her cellular nature, from the thought form created in her mind. The substance of her physical body will finally respond to the downflow of positive energy being directed upon it, and within her body she will become a well woman. This woman will have consciously wielded the laws of polarity, magnetic control, and precipitation to create a predetermined effect in time and space. Lesson 19. The goal of the evolutionary process. Controlling substance. The relationship of spirit, matter, and consciousness. The path of mental development. The redemption of substance. The motivating impulse. The divine purpose of will. The developed will. As we observe the efforts of humanity to surpass always that which it has, or has not done, we come to the realization that the evolutionary process is devoted primarily to one great achievement. Human consciousness in every situation and circumstance, even in the never-ending battle for survival, struggles to conquer and control substance. A human being is a synthetic creature, a combination of spirit, matter, and consciousness, who lives first as a form, secondly as a consciousness within a form, and finally as a young God in the Father's kingdom of spirit and matter. These two forces, which can be more easily understood when they are defined as will and intelligence, constitute the creative polarity that God or human must manipulate in order to manifest anything in appearance. Over a period of many long centuries, in which a unit of consciousness incarnates again and again, the consciousness gradually realizes its effort to control substance, to bend substance to its will, to mold it into those forms which, for one reason or another, bring it pleasure and satisfaction. These individuals realize that their endeavor to make money, to build a community, and to meet the demands of their apparent responsibilities are similar to the page of problems with which a child is confronted in an arithmetic class. These endeavors are teaching them the rudiments of a science that they will use as they reach spiritual maturity, in their natural progression from selfishness to selflessness. They enter upon the path of mental development, consciously searching for that knowledge which will make them master of their own fate. Seeking the philosopher's stone or the mysteries of creativity, they finally recognize the polar forces of their being. Will and intelligence. Like a light that illuminates everything it touches, the realization dawns. The equation they seek, the key to the creative process, lies in the proper relationship of spirit, matter, and consciousness. They are the consciousness, their will is an extension of spirit, and their mind constitutes their quota of intelligent substance. They have now grasped the thread of wisdom which unravels the mystery, rendering all that was dim, dark, and unknown to them, clear, beautiful, and knowable. They have entered upon the path of wisdom where the secrets of spirit and matter reveal themselves to their consciousness. They have tasted knowledge and are becoming hungry for more. Their next step upon this new path teaches them where and how to find that knowledge. In their mind they retrace steps taken in the past, looking closely at those simple facts with which they have become so familiar. They overlook nothing now, not even the most commonplace. For here, deep within its heart, may be another clue to the mystery. They know that every experience and every form in the world, from the conception, fetal life, and birth of a child, to the purchase of their own suit of clothes, is the result of the creative process. Nothing happens by chance. Not even an accident is accidental. Everything that is something had to be created by the same process that brought the human soul into being. That process works, whether or not the individual is consciously aware of it. The task then is to become aware of it, to learn how to use the creative process deliberately and with purpose. When humans can do this, they can aid in the redemption of substance, redeeming the form nature to the spiritual growth and development of human consciousness. As seekers cast their newly opened eye again upon their world of form, they use the law of correspondence in order to further unravel the mystery, as above, so below. The creative law works on all levels, and in all places. We discover it by observing it in operation and thus applying the law in our life and affairs. The divine spirit, that which we call Father, is the motivating impulse behind all that lives. It is the life, hidden by the form, working within that form to produce the growth of consciousness. It gives itself to matter, yet remains itself within matter. This is God, the Father, the positive pole of manifestation. The matter aspect, which in its highest frequency is the mind of God, is the form-building substance which arranges itself in the pattern dictated by the Spirit. Spirit enters into matter, motivating intent into divine intelligence, and the sons of God are born, units of consciousness born between spirit and matter, the second person, or identification, in the Holy Trinity. Thus, we conceive of God as being three persons in one: Father, Son, and Mother, or Spirit, Christ, and matter. As above, so below. Man is created in the image and likeness of God. The human soul, the small child of God, must then be a trinity within him or herself, capable of the creative process. He is a consciousness possessed of a creative will and an active moving intelligence, and because he has reflected himself outwardly via a body of appearance. That body is his instrument of contact within the frequency of substance in which he is temporarily living. Via his growth within, and his contact with this particular frequency of substance, he will eventually redeem it to the Father's kingdom. According to his manipulation of his will and his mind, the human soul creates those experiences that evolve him into adulthood as the Christ. Seekers who come thus far upon the path of mental development examine the development of their will. If their will is an extension of spirit, and not just a part of their own personal property, it is already impressed with a divine intent. That is, it carries a purpose that is above and beyond their personal self. Yet, their personal self is included in that purpose, since the purpose, is of the one life and includes all humanity. Via their will then, seekers discover the will of God. They align their will with the will of God. Pause for a few moments and become poised in the center between the brows. Contemplate your faculty of will. Realize that this same faculty is a part of the divine heritage of humanity, that every human being, regardless of who they are, is indwelt by this same spirit which manifests itself as will. Contemplate its purpose. What is the divine purpose of my will? Align it with the will of God. Not my will, but thine. When we come to the realization that what we have considered a personal will is after all an extension of spirit, we realize what is meant by free will. Humanity has been given the right to use God's will, his motivating spirit, the positive pole of the creative process. If that will is used for the sake of the separated self, rather than for the good of the human family, it is misused. An error is created in the nature of life, for the will, any will, is God's will and concerns his whole manifest expression of himself. Thus, the admonition, not my will, but thy will be done. It is suggested that the student give this concept much thought and contemplation, for it carries within it the clear light of illumination. Such illumination reveals the purpose of life itself, of humanity, and of the individual. Attempt to become acquainted with this faculty. How does it function? What is its stage or degree of development for you and for humanity? A developed will is 1. Directive, it directs the life and affairs according to a known purpose. 2. Creative, it creates the forms which will aid the life in the accomplishment of its plans. 3. Magnetic, it attracts to the life all that is needed to carry out the planned activity. In addition to the above, the will, when aligned with its source, becomes the faculty of inspiration. It brings into the mind all of that knowledge relative to the growth and expansion of the consciousness involved. Lesson 20. The white magician thought forms direct feelings. We can choose our feelings, choosing and creating consciously. Growing into the expression of the Christ by practicing the techniques. Appropriating the law of polarity. Building a thought form, energy follows thought. How has the will been used in the past to create the experiences with which the student is so familiar and of 10 satiated? If you will recall, in Lesson 13 it is stated, emotions are feelings which do not just happen to us by chance. We create them either consciously or unconsciously as we react to situations, people, or things. Human beings will feel whatsoever they choose to feel. They react with a particular emotion in a given circumstance because, sometime in the past, with their will they created in their mind a thought form that directs their emotional energies to express in this way. In order for the student to grasp the reality of this concept, certain experiments can be undertaken which will prove its truth. 1. Pause for a few moments and choose to feel a certain emotion. Do not think of a reason for this feeling, but only of the particular shade of emotion itself. Now, with the will focused in the mind, produce the emotion until you experience the depth of its feeling reaction. Relax the reaction, drop it or simply let it go, and calm the emotional nature. 2. Choose a different emotion, the opposite of the one just created, and again with the will produce its expression until you experience the depth of its feeling reaction. Permit it to subside and calm the emotional nature. 3. Consider a situation which normally produces a specific emotional response from you, preferably one of resentment or depression. Permit the feeling reaction to rise up from your emotional nature as you contemplate the situation, until it reaches its zenith. Now, with the will focused in the mind, take hold of this response. Realize that the energies you expend via this particular emotional response are the same energies you would expend if your reaction were one of love and understanding. It is the same energy impressed with a different intent by your will. Then ask yourself these questions. A. Is this emotional response adding strength to the forces of light or to the forces of darkness in my world? B. Are its effects of a beneficial or a harmful nature? C. Do I really want to react in this way? Consciously and deliberately choose the feeling with which you will respond to this situation in the future. Focus the new intent by creating a thought form in your mind that will turn the emotion into an expression of Christ love in response to the same situation. Create the emotion until you feel love flowing out of you toward both the situation and the persons involved. Then with that love ask the Spirit of Christ to manifest right relationship for all concerned. Relax the reaction and calm the emotional feeling nature, flooding it with peace. What constitutes cause? What and where is cause? Does it lie in the experience or in the mind creating the experience? But there are certain experiences I know I didn't create, the student objects. Are there, really? If a human being holds within their mind a thought form that states, I do not like people who are dictatorial. I hate and resent them, they will attract such people to them via the magnetic quality of their will. The will attracts to a person all that is needed to carry out a planned activity, and the thought form constitutes an unconsciously created plan to hate dictatorial people. With their will, they create the experience necessary to their growth, in this instance growth out of hate into love. A thought form, regardless of its nature, is a planned activity, for energy follows thought. It produces an emotional and a physical reaction. It is suggested that students use the 3 experiments in this lesson as a daily practice until they teach themselves to choose and to create consciously, rather than unconsciously. Adult seekers are too often lax in their application of that which is sought and has been found. If children are learning to read, they are disciplined to practice reading every day in school until they have become skilled in the mechanics of doing so. When young adults enters college to learn a profession or a trade, they must discipline themselves to practice the mechanics of it until they become a skilled technician in their chosen field. They teach their form nature to respond in a particular way via the self-imposed disciplines of a specific training program. Once this training has become a part of their built-in response mechanism and sinks into their subconscious, then their mind can be free to enter into the larger issues involved in their profession, but not until they have acquired the necessary skills. This applies to the above techniques just as it does to everything else. If human beings initiate a goal of growth and development, they must discipline their form nature to make that growth through practice and training. Many times a student will read through a series of instruction of this nature once or twice, and accept the concepts presented with the joy of discovery and recognition, only to become disillusioned later because they cannot make them work. They may apply the 3rd experiment given in this lesson to a response they sincerely wish to change, working for 10 or 15 minutes to alter a pattern that has taken years to build. If, and when, they react again according to the old pattern, they are dismayed, disillusioned, and sometimes bitter. It didn't work. Of course it didn't. Does a man play Chopin after practicing his scales 1, or 2, or even 3 times? Would the potential mathematical genius develop into the expression of her genius if she were not drilled in the fundamentals of arithmetic during her school years or at some time during her life? In the same way, people grow into the expression of the Christ by drilling themselves in the techniques of love and light attendant to the Christ principle. A disciple becomes a white magician by practicing the techniques of white magic. Sincere students will establish a daily routine of practice in which they apply the techniques given them with a perseverance that builds them into their form nature. We have said that there are three major laws that are inherent within the creative process, and that students must learn how to wield these laws in order to master their own fate. To do this, they must work with each one separately until, via practice, they understand and can apply them in right relationship to one another. The following 3 exercises are given as a part of the daily training program to be initiated by the serious student. Exercise number 1. The law of polarity has to be appropriated via comprehension and an act of the will by the creative consciousness. A. Realize that the forces of will and intelligence are the polar forces of creativity. They are the same to the soul as spirit and matter are to the consciousness of God. B. Realize that you have inherited these two forces from the One Life as your divine heritage, and that it is your divine right as a son of God to wield them. C. Then practice relating them, or bringing them creative thinking. Move to Archive X together in order to create a magnetic field of creativity. 1. Focus the consciousness steadily in the center between the brows and bring the intent of the will to bear upon the mind. Let your intent be a positive one to manifest the Christ principle in your life and affairs. 2. Imagine these two forces, the will and the mind, coming together in the ajna center to create a magnetic field of creativity. 3. Then separate them, permitting the will, focused intent, to recede back into the head and the intelligent substance of the mind to become quiescent. Do this exercise 3 or 4 times daily, each time becoming as consciously aware of the will and the intelligent mind as two polar forces, as is possible. If you persist in carrying out this daily activity, you will comprehend the polar forces and the law of polarity as a reality. Exercise #2. A thought form is constructed as the magnetic field, created by the polar forces of will and mind, and is maintained in the mind. A. Focus the consciousness steadily in the center between the brows and bring the will to bear upon the mind via the focused intent to become consciously creative. B. Maintain the magnetic field in the mind by holding the intent steady and observe the construction of the thought form. Do not interfere with the creative activity taking place, but rather observe the thought which is born in the magnetic field as a result of your intent. Lesson 21. Self-awareness. The One Life, aloneness, fear of death. The 7 kingdoms of nature. Mineral kingdom, plant kingdom. Animal kingdom, human kingdom. The spiritual kingdom of conscious souls. The kingdom of monads, the kingdom of the logoi. Integration of body, emotions, and mind in aspiration to the Father's kingdom. Humanity is an integral part of that life in which we live, move, and have our being. Our appearance is as a separate entity, independent of, though related to, other lives, and because of this appearance we seldom realize our full identity or our field of spiritual relationships. Individuals think they come into the world alone and go out of it alone, that the innermost privacy of their mind and emotions are peculiarly theirs, different somehow from the mind and emotions of anyone else. A person's definition of the self, which we find in Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, is Homoman, the genus of mammals consisting of mankind, usually considered as belonging to the order primates, which contains also the monkeys, apes, and lemurs. Humanity today is a self-conscious animal whose conscious awareness is contained within the separative shell of its ego. Their relationships with and within their world are from a self-centered perspective. They see from within the self as the center, all that takes place outwardly as happening to, by, for, or because of themselves. Their God, if recognized, is placed outside themselves and their planet, somewhere in the vast, remote distance of heaven. They are separated in consciousness from God. The individual states in effect, I am I, myself. You, meaning deity, are God. We are separate, different, and apart from one another. Other human beings they perceive as forms which impinge upon their consciousness from the outside, forms which they can never really know because they are outside. Yet, these others do bring them pleasure and or pain. Their sense of aloneness even in the midst of the many is almost the greatest sense they have. It dominates everything else to give them the inner insecurity of the lost. They keep that insecurity hidden from their own conscious mind to a greater or a lesser degree, but even though they bury it deep within their subconscious, it dictates many of their attitudes and responses. Individuals are afraid to die because they really do not believe in the existence of anything outside themselves. Their self is the form nature, the body, feelings, and thoughts. When these are gone, they are gone. God, Creator, is gone, and so are their fellow human beings. Yet, humanity is an integral part of that life in which we live, move, and have our being. We do not come into incarnation alone and unaided, nor do we go out in such a way. An individual is not a tiny sphere of consciousness that is separate from all other beings. Individuals have only to arrive at the reality of the one life within their conscious awareness to experience the fulfillment of their being. The one life indwells all forms from its cosmic center of origin, giving each an identity and an expression of itself. It flows into and focuses itself within the many stars which make up the cosmos, giving each the appearance of a life and affairs peculiarly its own. From the star the one life flows into and focuses itself within the orbiting planets so that each of these takes on the appearance of a life and affairs of its own. Thus, the solar systems and planetary schemes come into being. The one life focused within a planet continues to indwell form, focusing itself into 7 kingdoms in nature. Upon our planet 4 of these kingdoms have made an appearance in the physical plane. They are 1. Mineral Kingdom, 2. Vegetable or Plant Kingdom, 3. Animal Kingdom, 4. Human Kingdom. The other 3 remain as yet within the higher frequencies of substance, so we do not perceive them with the 5 physical senses. They are 5. The spiritual kingdom of conscious souls. This kingdom of life is composed of those who have evolved into awareness of themselves as souls and who live as such according to the precepts and ideals of the soul. It is in the process of externalization so that a new kingdom in nature is being born upon the physical plane of the planet. It will be differentiated from the human kingdom not only by its superior intelligence, which results because of its wisdom, but also by its altruistic love. It will be group conscious, each soul placing the good of humanity before its own personal pleasure or pain. This kingdom is in the process of externalization now and will have become recognized by the general public by the year 2001. It brings with it great new revelations regarding humanity's origin, their destiny, and the nature of their life. It brings, also, the reappearance of the Christ, that happening toward which we are now looking and working. When the New Age movement began in the 1960s, people began to understand reincarnation and karma. The difference between spirituality and religion became known. The maturing of the group of world servers as a functioning network has developed since that time. 6. The kingdom of monads, more commonly known as saints, elder brothers, or masters. These great lives are those who have evolved through the human and soul kingdoms into their adulthood as Christ, the Son of God. Each is a focal point of conscious awareness within that greater consciousness which is Christ, so that together they constitute the overshadowing, redeeming grace of God. In other words, their presence upon this planet, even though unseen, is its salvation from the illusion of the form nature. They watch over, guide via inspiration, and intervene, when invoked, in the life and affairs of humanity. 7. The kingdom of the Logoi. This is that center of consciousness within the planet which includes within its awareness the consciousness of all lives therein. It is the planetary fathers whose directing will governs the life and affairs of the planet according to a known purpose and goal. From here the will of God is impressed upon all substance within the planetary ring-pass knot. Note: a ring-pass knot is that vibratory frequency of light beyond which the consciousness of an organized life cannot pass. It maintains the appearance of an identity, separate in form from all other forms. Eventually, via the process of evolution, Each organized life pierces its ring path not to join with that life to which it is related via a vertical and a horizontal alignment. The latter three kingdoms in nature can truly be called the Father's kingdom, for here each life is consciously related to the Father. As we pause for a moment and consider again the cosmos with its stars, planets, and kingdoms in nature, in light of the above, it is possible to begin to sense with the intuitive faculty of the soul and to respond to the one life. That one life first created all of these forms as its will to be impregnated its own pure intelligence, then it poured itself in conscious awareness into the forms, imprisoning a bit of its own consciousness within each form as the form's soul. Yet, it remains itself in its own cosmic center of origin. God is both immanent and transcendent. Humanity is today a self-conscious animal. What will they be tomorrow? They stand upon the threshold of entry into the fifth kingdom in nature as more and more of their kind become soul-conscious. A person is a human being because that person is self-conscious. A human is a spiritual being when, and because, that human is soul-conscious. Their consciousness of soul is the vehicle of its expression. This is a critical point in the evolutionary development of humanity, and thus we see the world of affairs manifesting one crisis after another. This will continue until humanity completes the next step in its evolution. When a certain percentage of its members are soul-conscious, its life and affairs will reflect the altruistic motives of the fifth kingdom, and true peace will be enjoyed by all of humanity, as the condition most conducive to its spiritual growth and development. You are now ready for a new meditation exercise if you have used the one already given in Lesson 16 faithfully each day. If, and only if, you have used it each day as directed, you may put it aside and use the following one in its place. Visualize the tiny miniature of yourself in the center between the brows, and focus your consciousness there. Poised in the head, in the ajna center between the brows, contemplate the following concept for a few moments. I, your name, a son of God, integrate the forces of my body, emotions, and mind to aspire to the Father's kingdom. I integrate the consciousness of my personality to become soul-conscious. Then, endeavor to realize that you are a soul, and as a soul contemplate the one life of which you are a part, drawing upon the memory of the concepts given in this lesson regarding it. Then, spend a few moments radiating light and love and your realization of the one life into and through your environment. Lesson 22. Spiritual relationships within the one life. Awakening to world need, the United Nations. Finding a teaching, vertical alignment upward. A glimmer of love, vertical alignment downward, guiding the lower kingdoms, reorienting. The life and affairs, reflecting inner spiritual relationships, brotherhood, the growth and development of consciousness. When a human being becomes intuitively aware of the one life, their consciousness gradually becomes aware of their field of spiritual relationships within that life. Prior to this, their realization of relationship is largely confined to their immediate circle of friends, relatives, and if they have them, their enemies. For some this circle is fairly large, including such factors as business and civic interests, but for most it is relatively small and narrow, including only those who are of personal importance to the individual concerned. Gradually, however, these persons begin to awaken and respond to world need. They read and hear the current news, and it begins to make a real impact upon them. They are becoming more and more concerned with what is happening in the world of affairs. They may read a book, such as Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, or see the documentaries by David Attenborough, and as a result their consciousness becomes aware, to some degree, of the systemic crisis existing in the environment and in all human life and affairs. They follow the news regarding the environment of their own nation and of the world, and try to understand the dimensions of this problem. Within their own mind they try to find solutions and very often form opinions which may or may not be wise. If they were to study all they can find about civic, national, and international structures and learn about the United Nations, they may become inspired. If they are idealistic and intuitively responsive to human need, they may become attracted by this great international organism created to serve humanity. Here is a concrete form in the world of affairs that reflects, in part, the divine plan for humanity during this stage of humanity's evolution. Here, leading minds of many nations meet and discuss their common problems. Here, such discussions may avoid a small or a large war. Here, the education and care of the world's children, not just one group of young ones, but the world's also. Charles Eisenstein's A More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible. Children may be considered, planned for, and put into action. Such problems as social and economic adjustments for groups of people in any one of the countries belonging to the United Nations may find a voice and a solution through the meeting of minds dedicated to serving humanity. The United Nations, and spontaneous citizen campaigns, both locally and globally, are often a source of inspiration to the person who is just awakening to the one life. Having prompted self-inquiry, the individual may ask, "Where do I fit in?" They wonder. What can I do to make a difference? This individual is moving in consciousness out of their small sphere of ego interest into a new realization of the world in which they live. They want to become active and a part of the solution. Eventually they come upon a teaching of this nature, and one day they intuitively recognize that the many members of humanity are intimately related to one another. They are, each and every one, a part of the one life, in which we live and move, that flows through a star, a planet, an animal, a person. For the first time in their conscious memory they know love, a glimmer of that love which caused the one life to give itself to a form and expression. Suddenly, all life takes on a new importance, for regardless of how humble or commonplace its form, it is of the one life. Behind and within its appearance there is a divine purpose animating its livingness. The presence, the consciousness of the one life, is in all things. And if their intuition is sufficiently developed, they will recognize the interconnectedness of all things in the universe and that in oneness consciousness is everywhere present. They will understand and seek the positive pole of spiritual purpose within all beings and that the Spirit of Truth reveals the way and the purpose to the seeker even if it remains hidden to those who do not yet seek. In the first moment of realization, the individuals begin to grasp the vast connotations of the one life. They are not only related intimately to humanity, but to all other kingdoms in nature as well, for where there is form, there is also the one life. As a part of the human kingdom they are related, via a vertical alignment upward, with those higher kingdoms in nature that provide them with their spiritual ideals and aspirations. The higher kingdoms transfer the divine plan into the consciousness of humanity from their own higher consciousness of it. Humanity receives that plan into its own mind and brain as the ideals toward which it strives. As a part of the human kingdom, the individual is intimately related with the planetary life of which humanity is a part, and so on into infinity. They partake then of that life which manifests the ordered cosmos, that life which indwells and gives meaning to form, that life which is God. Via a vertical alignment downward they, as humanity, are related to the lower kingdoms in nature. It is humanity's responsibility to guide their evolutionary development, just as those higher kingdoms in nature guide the human evolution. Thus, they extend their proper relationship within the one life to its many parts, being receptive and responsive to the downflow of ideals and ideas from above, and at the same time creating their impression upon those below, such as the animal and plant kingdoms. Thus, the one life, in which they live, move, and have their being, evolves. Such an experience demands a following period in which the individual reorients their life and affairs to the one life, for to know that life is to serve it. Their service now is to humanity, for this is the part of the one life in which they find themselves intimately related with others. As human beings, they have an obligation to service which brings fulfillment. They must discover their relationships within its wide sphere in order to know and understand their soul's purpose for incarnation. Why did their soul come into this body and environment? In order to grow in consciousness, yes, but also to serve. These people are no longer satisfied with just their own growth. They are concerned with the growth and development of all human consciousness into the likeness of their Father. How may they aid this? First, what constitutes their field of spiritual relationships within the body of humanity? They are not only related to others as a form such as parent, child, partner, employer, employee, etc., but as a consciousness. It is in this relationship of consciousness to consciousness that purpose is revealed. Always they will find within the field of relationships those who are their elder and those who are their younger brothers, plus those who stand with them in the same spiritual age of growth. Note, the spiritual age refers to the age of the soul, and not to the chronological age of the form. It has to do with the number of times the soul has reincarnated and therefore with the degree of past experience it has had in the world of form. This inner spiritual relationship is not necessarily reflected outwardly in the life and affairs of the individual. A younger brother may be their immediate superior in the outer life, just as an elder brother who is far beyond them in consciousness may be their child or their employee. Therefore, they must learn to intuitively recognize those relationships in order to relate correctly within the one life. Right human relations is a need and a problem the world over. It is perhaps our most basic problem, the base of our pyramid of problems, therefore, it is a subject of great interest and importance to the seeker and the student of truth. The basic relationship between any two or more individuals or groups of individuals is that of brotherhood. All humanity is of one family, brothers in Christ. The quality of that relationship should be one of love. The form it takes in the world is of a karmic nature. That is, it is a result of past action and or mutual need for an experience that those related can give to one another because of their particular developments. You may or may not have incarnated in the past with your present associates, but certainly you have been brought together out of a mutual need for a common growth. You serve one another's evolution via the interrelationship of your tendencies, talents, and problems. Together you contribute the factors that will serve the growth of each one, and so you are related outwardly via the forms most conducive to that growth. This is as true of enemies as it is of friends, as true of those who oppose you as it is of those who help you. The purpose, then, of any and all relationships, is the growth and development of every consciousness involved. With this realization held steadily in mind, the newly awakened human beings set out to discover their field of spiritual relationships, and via that discovery, to establish right relationship in their life and affairs. In the beginning, they will use 3 techniques as follows. 1. They will observe their close associates in a new light. They will endeavor to detach in this observation from the emotional connotations of the form that the relationship takes and observe it as objectively as possible. B. What are the other's tendencies, talents, and problems insofar as they know? C. How are these related to their particular tendencies, talents, and problems? Example, individuals who have the tendency toward impatience will often find themselves closely related to those who aggravate the tendency. The relationship serves to teach them the need for patience and loving understanding while it teaches the other the need for consideration of others and loving understanding. Or, a woman whose life is complicated with the problem of financial insecurity may find herself in the position of being a leader of others whose problems are similar. The purpose of this relationship could be manifold. A. To teach the leader to place her faith and security in the one life in order to solve the problem and to serve more perfectly her function. B. To teach those following to place their faith and security in the divine plan rather than in a leader. C. To teach both leader and followers to work together for the common good of the group. 2. She will establish the quality of love within her relationships, which is brotherhood, by consciously serving the indicated growth that is the purpose of the relationship. 3. She will gradually ascertain, via intuitive recognition, the spiritual age of the consciousness involved, and endeavor to relate accordingly via the services indicated. Example, a man who recognizes one whose ideals and aspirations are spiritually in advance of his own may choose to serve humanity by helping to transfer such ideals and aspirations to those who are spiritually younger than himself, and whose need places them in right relationship with him for such a transference. Lesson 23. Integrating the persona. Establishing right relationship with the body, emotions, and mind. The interrelationship of humanity. Peace on earth and goodwill. Re-education in the concepts of truth. Integrating humanity's forces. The first real approach to the soul. Proving abstract truth via practical application. All of a human being's efforts toward self-improvement today are an unconscious response to the evolutionary demand that the person integrate the three aspects of that person's instrument, mind, emotions, and body, into a personality unit which is responsive to their soul. Such people are attempting to establish right relationship within their own threefold vehicle of expression so they may use it to fulfill that purpose for which it was designed. The integration of the substantial forces of an individual's form nature is no easy task, as evidenced by the instability manifesting within the body of humanity today. All of these forces have to be brought into a divine relationship with one another and directed into channels where divine work is done. In other words, they have to be made to serve a divine purpose according to a divine plan if the world problems experienced by today's humanity are to be solved. It is no longer safe for people to pursue the old separative aims and ambitions that led to the isolation of one group from another. The forces of destruction have become too powerful to permit hatred and resentment or rivalry to exist between individuals, peoples, and nations. Humanity must find a way in which to live together in peace and goodwill. Evolution has brought us this far. Neither is it the sole responsibility of one person or of one group of people to bring about the desired condition of peace and goodwill. It becomes everyone's responsibility to themselves, their family, their brothers, and their God to contribute their share to the effort humanity must make. Why is this? Why is it no longer possible for individuals to sit in the comfort of their home and let humanity solve its own problems? Because humanity, through the rapid evolutionary development of the last 100 years, has become so interrelated that each of us not only experiences the effects of such problems, but contributes to their cause as well. If one nation, or group, or class, is without adequate food, clothing, and shelter, it becomes a potential danger to all. It is prey to any ideology, system of thought, or rule that will give it an easement of the condition it suffers. Thus, the various isms find a vehicle through which to disturb the peace of the world. On the other hand, that ever-shrinking group of human beings who are well fed, housed, and clothed, who need not worry about physical survival, tend to become complacent, to rest in their ease, resenting even that impact upon their security which makes them aware of another's suffering. This is a deplorable condition because those who follow the destructive path look for and find the hungry through which to work, while the majority of peace-loving people may feel helpless in the face of world need, while those who remain comfortable withdraw into the false security of isolation in an endeavor to enjoy their peace. Peace is a cause that demands the positive influence of those who seek it. If we are to experience peace on earth, we must first exercise goodwill toward everyone. A united effort should be made, by all peace-loving peoples of the earth, regardless of national allegiance, to distribute the natural resources of the earth in such a way as to eliminate the dangers attendant with dire poverty from the human family. Poverty is one of the first problems that must be solved if humanity is to know an era that is free from the threat of war and destruction. Communism found its entry into the body of humanity through such poverty, and today poses one of the great threats to human evolution. In the last several decades it has become obvious that the displacement of resources misappropriated by a very few under capitalism channels those resources to a limited few and leaves the rest of humanity impoverished. The onset of the Aquarian Age calls for a reformulation of both economic ideologies as to how humanity can go forward. The principle of sharing, which is a part of the teaching of the Christ, must come into practice as a voluntary response of humanity's love for humanity and may form the basis of a new world economy in the Aquarian Age. This brings us to another related problem. The masses of humanity must eventually receive a common re-education in the basic concepts of truth which are universal in their application to the life and affairs of humanity. If a concept is a basic truth, it must result in the common good, it must be as applicable to one as to another. It cannot be a basic truth if its results are apparently good for one group at the cost of misery and suffering for another group. Human beings are yet children and they react as such. They tend to think in the patterns imposed upon them in their early years. Few are original and creative thinkers. Few are capable of seeing a truth through the veils of prejudice, of separativeness, and of isolation. Let a person who is idealistic in nature, yet prejudiced against the present authority, or those who are wealthy, come into contact with authoritarianism, and they will often gladly surrender one authority for the other far more dangerous one. Misplaced sympathy for the hungry mobs and resentment against those who are not hungry breed revolution and violence. Those who are idealistic and naturally sympathetic souls must have an ideal to follow, for most of them are also natural followers. They will work, fight, go to prison, or die for a cause which they believe is just. If these could be educated in an idealistic philosophy, and their responses trained to recognize that ideal which is of the highest good of every member of humanity, true solutions could be found which would eliminate the threat of the various isms without war. This presents a gigantic task, for it demands the cooperative effort of those who serve the idea and ideal of peace, to seek out, to embody, and to teach the peoples of the world those basic concepts of truth which are applicable to all humanity as children of God. If we would truly experience this world of peace and prosperity for all that we constantly discuss, but seek through military means, we must realize that we are our brother's keepers, and serve the divine plan for those brothers. The outer world of affairs is a reflection of the inner world of humanity, of which every individual is a part. If the inner world is one of instability, insecurity, and conflict, the world of affairs will reflect these conditions as its problems. If individuals are at war within themselves, they will be at war with others. If many people are at war within themselves, they will reflect their problem outwardly as a world condition. The responsibility must then be that of each and every individual in the world, for these make up the body of humanity. Human beings must integrate their forces into a one-pointed direction before they can hope to take up the full share of their responsibility to their brothers. The integration of the substantial forces of the form nature is the first responsibility of the individual to the many. They will contribute their share toward peace and goodwill as they bring their own instrument into an integrated unit that is responsive to this ideal. The substantial forces of the form nature are those forces that act to produce the affairs of humanity, the thought and emotional life which moves through the physical brain and body to relate human beings outwardly to one another in harmony or conflict. We call these forces, in their sum total, a personality, the face the soul shows in the world of affairs. Personality integration then becomes the necessity, as the individuals respond to the impact of world need during this period of evolutionary development. In order to achieve this, they must first understand 1. The form nature generally. 2. The form nature specifically. 3. The relationship between themselves as a consciousness and the form they inhabit. A. Mental. B. Emotional. C. Physical. 4. The relationship between themselves as a consciousness and the form they inhabit. In addition to the above understanding, the individuals must make their first real approach to their soul via aspiration to wisdom and a dedication to truth. Their soul becomes their ideal, and it is toward this ideal that they direct all of their efforts of self-improvement. What is the soul in relationship to the individual in the brain? This is ever the question that troubles and often baffles the student. Is this soul something that can be proven practical in the everyday life and affairs? Or is it simply a theory that we believe because it pleases us? A truth is of no value to the individual unless and until it can be proven to be practical in the daily life, for it is here, in the world of affairs, that we are placed to work out our own growth and development. What good is the concept of soul if it is only something about which we dream and theorize? Therefore, the first step seekers take after having found the abstract theory is to work it out in concrete facts that are a living proof, at least to them, of its spiritual value. This they do via experimentation with a formulated truth, using the technique suggested by the abstraction itself. Example 1. Abstract truth that may or may not be correct insofar as the personality is concerned. The soul is a body of consciousness created by the Divine Father, of which the conscious thinking I, the individual in the brain, is an extension. The major part of the soul, that which we call the higher consciousness, overshadows the body via a center at the top of the head. It holds itself free of and above the frequency of the form nature, but it does maintain a small thread of contact with the individual in the brain. Via this thread of contact, the overshadowing spiritual soul extracts the wisdom gained out of the individual's experience in the world of form. Via this same thread of contact, when the individual in the brain is seeking upward toward light, the spiritual soul releases to that individual spiritual guidance in the form of ideas, realizations of truth, and that wisdom which is applicable to the individual's particular situation. Later, after the individual has evolved to a certain point of development, the individual in the brain withdraws the focus of awareness into the center of the head, just above the pineal gland, and the overshadowing spiritual soul consciousness descends via its thread of contact into the center of the head. Here in this center of light the two are merged in awareness. The individual in the brain becomes the conscious soul incarnate, an initiate in the great white brotherhood of conscious souls. 2. Concrete facts to be proven via experimentation. A. That human beings are essentially a soul. B. That human beings have available to them that wisdom which will bring peace, love, and harmony into their daily life. C. That humanity is superior in their consciousness to the form nature they inhabit, and that they can order it to respond to their demands. 3. Techniques suggested in the abstraction itself. A. Through meditation, the individual in the brain aligns their consciousness with that of the overshadowing spiritual soul and discovers their true identity. This technique must be used over a period of time to be effective. These individuals must realize that they have to become fairly proficient in meditation in order to register the impression of the soul. If the daily meditation is carried out honestly, sincerely, and with perseverance, average students usually satisfy themselves as to their identity as a soul within 3 years' time. B. Through meditation, the individual in the brain aligns their particular problems with the overshadowing wisdom of their soul, and in positive receptivity, with the mind quiet, but alert and attentive, awaits the inflow of wisdom into their consciousness. This does not take so long to achieve as does the realization of actual identity. A meditation using the same problem each day will usually bring a realization of its wise solution from 1 to 3 months. As students become more and more adept in the use of the technique, the required length of time grows shorter until they can realize the solution to a particular problem in 1, 2, or 3 meditations. C. Through meditation, the individual in the brain may invoke the divine will of the overshadowing soul to discipline the form nature in its responses. The form nature is aligned with the overshadowing soul instead of with the personal will or desire nature of the persona. The individual's success will depend upon persistence in holding the alignment throughout the 24-hour day. In this way, the consciousness gradually controls the bodies it inhabits. Thus, individuals become the master of their own instrument. It no longer controls them with its reactive patterns, its likes, dislikes, etc. The student is advised to do more than give lip service to truth. Prove or disprove its spiritual value to yourself via a serious investigation. Experiment with its applied techniques and discover your own path of light out of the dark. It is this ideal toward which the personality integrates its substantial forces. Lesson 24. The Will of God. The laws of the will of God in relationship to substance. The law of economy. The law of relativity. The law of periodicity. The form is always transitory because that is its nature. It is made up of acting, living, intelligent substance that responds to the will of God. The will of God is expressed via certain laws that work out as the nature of a life in form. Thus, every form receives its inherent nature from the focused will of God. Humanity has only to understand that nature to consciously use it to their own advantage. The will of God in relationship to substance works out upon this planet via three major laws, which, in turn, manifest a basic nature within all forms. These laws are: 1. The law of economy, which states in effect that all forms shall serve the economy of the one life. The activity of the one life, insofar as this planet is concerned, is the growth and development of all consciousness therein into an expression of divine love wisdom. This means that every form upon the planet, whether created by God or humanity, shall serve that divine purpose. It will, consciously or unconsciously, with or without its own choice, aid the growth and development of consciousness into an expression of deity. If human beings should choose to oppose the manifestation of the divine plan, or of law and order, their form and the form of their activities will still serve the divine purpose, if only through example. They may suffer and appear to cause others to suffer untold agonies as a result of their action, yet some consciousness somewhere in their sphere of influence will be directly aided in its growth. Humanity has been given the freedom of choice to build whatsoever forms it can and wishes to build, but that is the extent of their so-called free will. The will of God always supersedes the little wills of humanity to turn its works into some good effect. Thus, there is good in all things, even so great a misadventure as a world war. We have made tremendous strides in evolutionary development even during the last two bitter conflicts that have engaged the greater part of humanity in destroying members of its own family. While the minds and hearts of men and women everywhere were ruled and driven by greed, hatred, fear, or oftentimes bewilderment, to kill or be killed, the growth and development of consciousness still proceeded. Many have realized, with full clarity, the need for a divine intervention into the life and affairs of human beings because of their experiences, and they seek to invoke it in the presence of the Christ. Thus, we realize that nothing is ever totally evil or so-called bad. This is an important concept for the individuals who are endeavoring to walk the upper way, for it has many applications to their daily life and affairs. In every appearance of opposition, disappointment, or failure there is an opportunity for growth. The individual who can seize the opportunity consciously and with intent is gradually learning to master the form nature. 2. The law of relativity, which states in effect that all forms are interrelated and interdependent within the one life. Remember that the form is composed of acting, living, intelligent substance. This substance in its totality is the substantial body of God, the matter aspect, or the third person in the Holy Trinity. The soul or consciousness aspect comes into being as a result of the interaction of God's will and God's intelligence, spirit and matter. Humanity's bodies are constructed out of this divine substance in three ranges of vibratory activity. As the consciousness attracts these intelligent lives, particles of divine substance, unto itself, and reflects its own being upon them, they arrange themselves into a pattern, which, to the sensory apparatus, takes on the appearance of a form, according to the reflected state of being, consciousness or soul, to which they have been attracted. If this seems difficult, pause for a few moments and try to follow the concept slowly and with care. Endeavor to imagine spirit and matter as two polarities of one energy. Spirit is the positive pole and expresses as divine will. Matter is the negative pole and expresses as pure intelligence, or what we call substance. Note: it may help the student to meditate upon the concept of intelligence and substance as being synonymous occult or spiritual terms. Between this polarity and because of its interaction, is born consciousness, a state of being identified as soul, which is first without form. Imagine that soul or consciousness as being magnetically attractive to millions of tiny intelligent lives that we call substance. See those lives moving in toward the soul, arranging themselves within its magnetic field according to the patterns its particular state of being creates via radiation. Now imagine the tiny lives coalescing according to the dictated pattern, to produce the form of a body in three ranges of vibratory activity. A. Mental. B. Emotional. c. Physical. Thus, the form comes into being with the soul or consciousness aspect at its very center, and the spirit overshadowing. The soul is fourth-dimensional, so while it exists in the very center of the form, as the self-conscious I, it also exists above and out of the frequencies of that form, as the created Son of God. Note: humanity must turn its awareness gradually inward toward this center, which is in the brain cavity just above the pineal gland, to a realization of the meaning of the self-conscious I, before it can merge in awareness with the higher consciousness of that which they are in reality. The majority of human consciousness has become identified with and imprisoned within or by the form nature it inhabits. This means that its awareness, which proceeds outward from its identity in a horizontal direction, has been caught up in the glamour of the form. It identifies with the matter aspect in an illusory world of its reflection. Humanity has become negative in their awareness to the form they inhabit, therefore, its nature dominates and swallows up their spiritual identity in the one life. Magnetic radiation is a part of the nature of consciousness, therefore, the self-conscious I, indwelling a form, continues to radiate its state of being aware into and through the form to create another magnetic field. This second magnetic field is in the outer world of affairs, and within it falls the individual's immediate environment, their personal spheres of influence. The forms in the physical plane of affairs are, again, intelligent lives that are attracted into a pattern of relationship according to the radiation exerted upon them by consciousness. Again pause, and consider the concept carefully. The individual in the brain is a soul, a state of consciousness that is a state of being aware. Individuals radiate that awareness through their mental, emotional, and physical bodies into the world of affairs as a magnetic field. While we may not perceive this radiation with the physical senses, we can see its effects in the very substance of our environment. The radiation is magnetically attractive. It attracts the substance and forms of the environment into specific patterns of relationship that provide the experiences necessary to the growth and development of the consciousness involved. If this seems difficult, consider your own radiation. Of what are you aware? If your awareness is of limitation, unhappiness, etc., you will manifest, via attraction, that same condition in your life and affairs. What is life, but God's gift to the living? What is love, but God's gift to the loving? And what is joy, but God's gift to the joyous? It is a good practice, at this point, for the students to define their particular state of awareness by writing it out in a notebook, and then compare it with those forms of experience that they are continually meeting in the everyday life. This brings one to a sharp realization of one's own need in consciousness, the need to expand the awareness to include and embody those spiritual truths which are of real value. Thus, our sense of value undergoes rapid and sometimes radical change. Because of the basic law of relativity, every form from individuals' bodies, their thoughts and feelings, to their experiences, has a specific effect upon all other forms and the consciousness therein. It is a one life even at the lowest level of its expression. Right relationship, or divine order, is achieved when the consciousness realizes this fact and relates those forms with which they are primarily concerned with the purpose of the one life. Thus do they hand the form nature into the service of the divine plan, and become a conscious disciple of the Christ. Incidentally, there are many such in our modern world. The forms, bodies, of humanity have a particular function within the organized life of which they are a part, which is their divine relationship within and to that life. The forms that individuals build, since they are constructed out of divine substance, should have, also, a particular function that is their divine relationship to the one life. A form constructed for other than a divine purpose is a misuse of energy and substance. 3. The law of periodicity, which states in effect a. That every form has its own inherent cycles of growth, maturity, and decline, these cycles being impressed upon it at the moment of its conception by the focused intent of the consciousness involved. b. That the cyclic activity of every form is peculiar to the form itself, yet subject to and contained within the more powerful cycles of that organized life of which it is a functioning part. This law is somewhat more difficult than the first two for the young student to grasp and understand, because it is more complex in nature and covers a broader field of knowledge. We shall touch upon it in this and the next lesson, and for those who are interested we shall proceed into a more comprehensive study of it in a later work. Our first consideration of this law, in order to approach its meaning, lies in the fact that every form carries as a part of its inherent nature its own cycles of activity. These cycles were impressed upon or impregnated within the form at the moment of its conception by the focused intent of the creating consciousness. Let us consider the overshadowing spiritual soul contemplating reincarnation, and from its own plane, directing the building of its new body of expression. The soul holds within its own consciousness a definite purpose and goal, the combination of which may be defined as a plan of growth and/or service to be accomplished via this reincarnation. The plan is the focused intent, the divine will of the soul, which acts as the motivating cause or impulse for the new cycle of expression of form. In addition to this, the soul has an old clay with which it must work, the personality consciousness developed via past incarnations. The old clay is molded by the motivating impulse or focused intent of the overshadowing spiritual soul, and a new form is created. The soul plan lies within that form, as a specific pattern of growth and development lies within any seed. The plan is manifested outwardly as the pattern proceeds to unfold within, via rhythmic cycles of activity. These cycles are many and varied, major and minor. They constitute in their sum total the opportunities, the possibilities, and the impossibilities with which the incarnating consciousness is faced in its daily life and affairs. These cycles are the pattern by which the purpose and goal of the spiritual soul can be worked out into manifestation. They are truly the seasons, a vital and important part of the form nature within and to which the incarnating consciousness must adapt, and with which they can cooperate in order to achieve their highest good in the physical plane of affairs. Certainly to beginners it must seem almost impossible to believe that they can ascertain and understand their own cycles of activity. Yet, this is not only possible, but a part of the evolutionary development which everyone will someday achieve. Realize that this development is one that you are moving into now. Look forward to it with eagerness, and in the meantime endeavor to grasp those concepts that are an approach to full understanding. Knowledge of one's cycles of activity is a part of the wisdom of the soul, and can be invoked into the brain consciousness via 1. Right aspiration. 2. Right meditation. 3. Right application. Lesson 25. The cycle of life. The movement of the form in time and space. Death, a release from a phase of growth. The 3 major and 9 minor life cycles. The first major cycle, the recapitulation process. The physical cycle. The emotional cycle. The mental cycle. The second major cycle, service. Service to the immediate environment. Service to the community. Service to humanity. The 7th, 8th, and 9th cycles of life. A focused intent of the soul, which we referred to earlier as the motivating impulse for a particular reincarnation, produces a planned activity, form, which progresses to its conclusion via a cyclic, rhythmic alteration of the form. The law of periodicity, which, in conjunction with other laws, governs this process, can be understood more easily as the law which governs the movement of the form in time and space. It is this movement which results in activity. The major cycle in the life of any form is that which governs its span of life, the length of time spent in appearance. The soul comes into incarnation on a cycle that is determined by the divine plan of growth for that particular life in the world of form. Thus, the seed of death is present within the form itself at its very birth. One can state correctly that the cause of death is birth, the initiation of a planned activity. Such a plan must reach a conclusion. Make no mistakes, every little life serves a divine purpose in relation to the one life. That purpose is the growth of consciousness. The soul plans from the end to the beginning, therefore, the conclusion of its plan, which results in the death of the form, is a predetermined fact in nature. Why does humanity fear death, which not only releases them from their prison, but which marks the conclusion of a divinely created plan? If humanity could but realize that death, when it comes, is their greatest opportunity, their release, and in a sense their graduation from a particular phase of growth, they could meet it intelligently, absorbing from it a certain wisdom that can be gained in no other way. Here in this divine law is an expression of God's mercy. Do not misinterpret or misrepresent this instruction as a condonement of suicide, for it is not that. The overshadowing spiritual soul abstracts the incarnating consciousness from out of the form, according to its predetermined plan, at that cyclic moment which was initiated at the time of birth. Later, as the wisdom of the soul becomes a part of the human consciousness, humanity will cooperate with this aspect of the law, preparing for their discarnations with love and understanding, to finally move out of the form in full waking consciousness of what they are doing and why. There will evolve in the world of affairs a new science of dying, and, under soul guidance, people will leave their bodies and their works with a sense of fulfillment, of achievement. Until that time comes, another great cycle in human affairs, the best preparation is the overcoming of fear and dread via right understanding. The potential life cycle of a human form, insofar as present-day humanity is concerned, is one full century. Cycles do vary with different individuals for reasons peculiar to the individual soul. However, this cycle is standard or normal as a potential for average humanity. The soul spends approximately from 240 to 300 years out of the world of affairs between incarnations. Again, this cycle may vary in particular instances, but it can be considered standard or normal for average humanity. Contained within the one life cycle are 3 major and 9 minor cycles which produce the growth, maturity, and decline of the form resulting in its climax or conclusion. They are enumerated and defined as follows. The first major cycle is that which provides for the growth of the bodies, and permits time for the recapitulation of that which has gone before, thus providing the opportunity for the integration of the consciousness in its time and place, and the stabilization of that consciousness at its point of evolutionary development. It contains within it 3 minor cycles and an interlude, each consisting of approximately 7 years. The emphasis of growth is placed in 1. The physical body during the first cycle of from 1 to 7 years. 2. The emotional body during the second cycle of from 7 to 14 years. 3. And the mental body during the third cycle of from 14 to 21 years. During the first cycle, the incarnating consciousness recapitulates via symbolic experience that growth made when it was little more than animal life. This includes the individualization period, when humanity realized it was a self-conscious I, and the development of the personal will focus which was made during the battle for survival against the odds of nature and the elements. Humans had to find their place in nature. Thus, we see the child during this period recapitulating the growth and the development of a will that is primarily and normally self-centered, and the battle for survival of that will within its environment. During this cycle certain karmic adjustments are made so that each time more wisdom is added to that already gained by the soul from the experience. During the second cycle the incarnating consciousness recapitulates via symbolic experience that growth achieved thus far as an emotional human being in relationship to people and things. Here the consciousness re-experiences that first need to adjust within a society of individuals, to relate via feeling above the necessity of physical endurance or existence, so the emotional life becomes more important than the physical. During the third cycle the incarnating consciousness recapitulates, again via symbolic experience, the growth of the mind nature achieved thus far. According to its evolutionary development it learns to use its mind and to discipline its emotion from a mental control. It relates to its environment via a mental interest, and a developing sense of responsibility. In this time and place, insofar as the greater part of humanity is concerned, there is not so much recapitulation here as in the other 2 cycles. 4. Humanity en masse is at that point of evolutionary development which has to do with the growth of the mind, and the building of a fine, clear mental body. Humanity today is in the process of shifting its focal point of attention from the emotional aspect of its nature into the mental. The recapitulation is achieved largely through book learning, the development of skills, and the emotional experiences that demand mental attention. Disciplinary training as to moral and ethical principle will soon receive a much greater degree of attention during this period in the life, from 14 to 21 years, than ever before in the history of our civilization. This brings us to the interlude that again usually covers a period of 7 years. An interlude is a pause between two major activities during which the consciousness gathers all of its forces into a center in preparation for a new initiatory effort. During this first interlude in the life, the individual integrates and stabilizes that growth that has been made during the 3 preceding cycles. As these individuals near the end of the interlude, they begin to align with the purpose of this particular incarnation. Here is presented an opportunity to every individual to become consciously aware of their soul purpose and, in degree according to evolutionary development, of their soul plan. They not only realize responsibility but accept it and prepare through further learning to execute it. By the time they are 28 years of age, they should have reached maturity, i.e., have become integrated in time, or achieved continuity with their past. Why do we see so little evidence of this soul-planned activity in the world today? Because humanity has so little understanding of their cycles of opportunity. The parent seldom understands that their child is recapitulating past growth via their everyday experience. Because of this, the parent seldom understands the child. The parents are handicapped insofar as aiding the young one's soul growth is concerned. Because of this, the child does not achieve the desired continuity, but is lacking the necessary growth in those areas where adjustments were not made. Thus, we are the adult man or woman who is immature in certain areas of our consciousness and seldom capable of taking advantage of our cycles of opportunity. We have not grown up out of our past sufficiently via the recapitulation process. This is one of the conditions manifesting in the world today as a result of humanity's point of evolutionary development. Yet, we are moving into a new age of growth in which the wisdom of the soul will make itself felt in the life and affairs of each and every one of us. The new age education will devote itself to the growth of the soul within the child into that maturity which is a continuity with its past and a realization of soul purpose. Thus, the young men and women of tomorrow will move forward into the world of affairs from a new point of focus, with a new vital sense of direction and a knowledge of destiny, cyclic opportunity. The individual's growth from the age of 28 or thereabouts will be a new growth producing new experiences rather than the ceaseless repetition of old situations and circumstances. The second major cycle is that which provides the mature consciousness with its opportunity to make a contribution to the society and the civilization within which it lives via initiatory effort. It contains within it 3 minor cycles and an interlude, each usually consisting of 9 years. The emphasis of the initiatory effort falls in 1. Service to the immediate environment and sphere of influence during the 4th minor cycle of from 28 to 37 years of age. 2. Service to the community via an expanding sphere of influence during the 5th minor cycle of from 37 to 46 years of age. 3. Service to humanity via an ever-expanding sphere of influence during the 6th minor cycle of from 46 to 55 years of age. During the 4th minor cycle, the man or woman in the brain is given the opportunity to take up karmic responsibilities to family and associates via a planned activity which they themselves must initiate. Here they are afforded the opportunity of balancing old karmic debts via a new effort of love. Within this cycle of 9 years they can, if they seize the opportunity presented by their soul, balance most of that personal karma precipitated from the past into the present incarnation. In so doing, they not only bring divine law and order into their life, but they orient it as well to the one life in which they live, move, and have their being. They tune in, so to speak, with God and reap the reward of many spiritual experiences in consciousness. During the 5th minor cycle, the incarnating consciousness turns its attention to a greater number of its brothers, expanding its sphere of influence to include in some field of service the community within which it is housed and fed. Its planned activities are made with the good of the community or larger group of associates in mind. Thus, it is afforded the opportunity to balance most of that group karma precipitated from the past into the present incarnation. As it seizes this opportunity, it is growing ever more aware in its consciousness that it is a soul, and that, like itself, its brothers are souls who need and have a divine right to the contribution it has to make. During the sixth cycle, the incarnating consciousness, if it seizes the opportunity placed before it, begins to think in terms of human need. Here in this cycle, its service potential is expressed and its contribution reaches a height or climax. According to its evolutionary development, the individual now may contribute its share to the civilization it has helped to build in former incarnations. It may right an old wrong or add to an old good, either of which will have an effect of betterment for many members of humanity. Its consciousness becomes more and more enriched with spiritual values, which it expresses in the life it lives. This brings the man or woman to the second interlude at the approximate age of 55 years. Again they pause between the activities and gather together their forces. At this time, during the 9 years of interlude, they are faced with a major decision, the outcome of which is usually determined by their evolutionary development, the need of their time, and their relationship to that need. They must decide whether to permit the instrument to relax its effort as it begins its decline or whether they shall force it on to new heights of service. Regardless of the choice they make, this is an esoteric interlude in their life. They no longer expand their activity, though, if they are taking full advantage of the opportunity of this interlude, they will maintain the useful function of their service activity. They integrate and stabilize their service on that level reached during the sixth minor cycle. The third major cycle provides the incarnating consciousness with the opportunity to initiate a fresh new effort of service to humanity and the one life, and or to put their affairs in order. In either event, the instrument has entered its major cycle of decline, which affords the consciousness with an opportunity unparalleled thus far in the life and form for spiritual growth. The consciousness is permitted to function with an ever greater freedom from the demands of the form nature. This cycle contains within it 3 minor cycles and an interlude usually consisting of 9 years. The emphasis of the decline falls in 1. The physical body during the 7th minor cycle of from 64 to 73 years of age. 2. The emotional body during the 8th minor cycle of from 73 to 82 years of age. 3. And the mental body during the 9th minor cycle of from 82 to 91 years of age. During the 7th cycle, the physical body begins to relax its sensory demands upon the incarnating consciousness. Its activity enters a gradual decline in intensity, the brain consciousness gradually ceases to respond to the emotional tides, and the physical environment itself relaxes its hold upon the human being in the brain. This can be a very difficult period if not understood properly. It is the cycle most feared by the consciousness who is without a sense of purpose or divine direction. They feel themselves to be slipping away from all that is known and dear to them. If they are identified with and as the form, it is naturally frightening to observe its decline. They feel themselves to be dying, and not knowing what the future holds, they either put up a last-minute resistance to the decline or tend to limit their consciousness and its effectiveness to the limitations of their instrument. Misinterpretation of what is happening, and fear of the future, causes illness and failure of bodily function during this cycle and the premature death of so many. Senility at this age, or any age for that matter, is a condition created by humanity. It is not natural either to the form or the consciousness. During this cycle of from 64 to 73 years, the incarnating consciousness may either initiate a new effort of world service or it may gradually retire from the field. If it does retire, it has the opportunity to enter a life of higher study, meditation, and contemplation. It may now devote itself to higher truth as the form nature relaxes its demands upon it. During the 8th minor cycle, the emotional nature relaxes its demands and all ambitions and desires fall away from the human being. The emotional tides cease and individuals are left free to function almost entirely in the mind nature. If their evolution is such that they have a highly developed mental body, they may still be of great service to humanity. They are capable of formulating the wisdom into concepts of truth that are applicable to their time and locale. They may be called upon for advice and counsel. If their evolution has not reached this high point of development, they are afforded the opportunity for conscious growth. They have the time and the inclination toward higher study. They may, if they wish, go so far as to prepare themselves mentally for future incarnations. If they initiated a new effort of service in the former cycle, it will reach its climax sometime during this one, and the human being will retire from the field. During the 9th minor cycle, the mental body enters its decline and the incarnating consciousness is freed from its demands. It ceases its constant form-making activity so that the thought life gradually becomes quiescent. Here the human being is afforded the opportunity of real meditation, free of the thought forms that formerly stood between themselves and their realization of pure being. They can now function in the realm of the soul if they have taken advantage of all former cycles of opportunity presented them. This does not mean that the mind becomes negative and impotent. It is held quiescent, but alert, attentive to the impress of the soul, so the light of the soul may pour through it to illumine the waiting consciousness. This presupposes an intensive inner activity. This brings the individual to their 91st year when they enter upon that interlude between living in a form and living out of a form. The interlude offers the opportunity of quiet reflection upon the past and a re-evaluation of all that has gone before, in this incarnation, in the light of the soul. This one goes out in full waking consciousness as they come to the end of their cycle of incarnation. They pass easily from their instrument and the world of affairs into that life after death which is natural to them. Lesson 26. The nature of the form. Making right use of the form nature. Invoking divine will. 2 characteristics of the negative aspect of deity. Inertia, activity. The motions of spirit and substance. Altering the motion via integration. The soul initiates a new motion. Taking up residence in the head. The 3 basic divine laws of economy, relativity, and periodicity give the form its nature. It is within this nature that the incarnating consciousness is imprisoned, with this nature that we are for a long cycle of growth identified, and by gradual control and right use of this nature that we are finally evolved into a conscious soul incarnate. The student at this point must learn to bring down and apply the theory to everyday life in order to prove or disprove its truth value. How can such a theory as this one be made applicable to everyday, mundane affairs? How can we relate the abstract to the concrete in such a way as to build a living structure of truth? The form, our bodies, and our environment, the thoughts and feelings we entertain and the acts we enter into, all serve the economy of the one life. All, then, are by nature imbued with a divine purpose, that purpose being the growth and development of consciousness into an expression of divine love wisdom, or what we may define as altruism. This inherent fact in nature, a human being cannot escape. This is our purpose generally, and specifically in the areas where we particularly lack altruistic motivations. Our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions will directly or indirectly, through suffering or fulfillment, pain or pleasure, according to our conscious or unconscious choice as a part of the economy of the one life, evolve the consciousness within our sphere of influence into a greater knowledge of divine love. Others may look at us and observe, that is not the way to behave. This is the way. Thus, we serve even without so intending. We ourselves suffer the repercussions of our own deeds, evolve and refine our expression gradually and finally into altruism. Thus, we cannot escape that purpose which works out as a part of the form nature itself. The form nature cannot help but relate to other forms in order to serve that purpose because relativity, too, is a part of its inherent nature. It must relate to those other forms which fall within its sphere of activity, and in so doing it brings about a conscious relationship of the indwelling consciousness with other units of consciousness. Humanity will love or hate. They will attract or repel. They cannot remain indifferent and remain sane. The forms and units of consciousness within a sphere of activity become so interrelated and interdependent that regardless of the quality of relationship, they cannot live without one another. This has become increasingly true in our modern world, which reflects the inner evolution of human consciousness. A human being may love or hate, like or dislike, be attracted to or repelled by the forms of a farmer, teacher, lawyer, leader, etc., but they cannot live the life they have chosen without those forms. No longer is it possible for a person, family, or even a nation to remain a totally independent unit. The economy of the world will no longer permit the continued isolation of one form and unit of consciousness from that life which is humanity. The interrelation of all lives, which reflects in the economy of our world, is pointing the way toward the reconstruction of humanity from centuries of painful experiences into an era of peace and goodwill. We have only to make right use of this nature in the cyclic opportunities or seasons, which the form presents in order to pass successfully through this transitory period from one era into a new one. We may shorten the time of transition by taking our evolutionary steps consciously in cooperation with these divine laws. Realizing that we are a part of the economy of the one life, and that the economy serves the divine purpose of life itself, we may consciously appropriate divine purpose and the divine power which accompanies it. We may realize that we are serving the evolution of consciousness or soul, and aspire to do so in a positive and creative way. Via rightly motivated aspiration we may invoke the divine will to illumine our consciousness. Realizing that we must relate, because this is a part of our basic nature and the nature of the form, we may consciously choose to relate with love as brother to brother in the family of God. We may then observe the cycles of opportunity presented us by the form, and in those cycles or seasons work out our spiritual growth and development, creating a new civilization whose quality is that of altruism, and whose activity provides the greatest good for the greatest number. Do not forget that the greatest good of the many must include and begin with the greatest good of every individual. The one life is focused into the many, and through the many into the individual. Before we pass from our consideration of the nature of the form, there are two other even more basic and, therefore, more inherent characteristics of the form which are derived from the negative aspect of deity. These two inherent characteristics are the nature of substance itself, before that substance has become assembled into a particular form. They are 1. Inertia. 2. Activity. They result in the creative ability of substance to arrange and maintain itself in any form impressed upon it by a focused will. The natural motion of substance is rotary. A particle of substance rotates upon its own axis and tends, by way of its inertia, to remain in that motion constantly. The moment spirit enters the particle of substance's field of receptivity, a new motion or activity is created. This is a circulatory motion. The particle of substance now orbits around its positive pole of spirit in a path created by the intent of the spirit. Its basic inertia will maintain it in the path first entered upon so that its orbit remains fixed. As consciousness or soul is born in the magnetic field created between matter and spirit, it produces another new motion of substance. The particle not only rotates upon its axis and orbits around its positive pole, but it now enters a spiral pattern of activity. The soul, which is the mediator between spirit and matter, exerts a magnetic influence upon the orbiting substance. That substance begins to spiral, moving closer to its positive pole as the soul exerts its cyclic attraction upon it. Thus, evolution of the matter aspect proceeds, along with the evolution of the soul. Forms are created, evolved, and finally lifted up into heaven, the frequency of spirit, via the evolving consciousness or soul mediating between spirit and matter. It is realized that much of this is abstract and difficult to grasp at the onset. However, The basic characteristics which work underneath the nature of the form can be related and applied to the individual's own growth and development as well as to their life and affairs. Underlying the nature of the forms with which they must work is an even more powerful characteristic of matter which must be taken into account. The form naturally tends to repeat over and over the activity into which it is first impulsed. Thus, an automatic response mechanism is built into the physical brain and nervous system, habits are formed, and experiences repeated in an almost endless succession of cycles. Only the positive influence of consciousness, via conscious or unconscious reevaluation, can alter the already established motion, activity, of a form. The form will act because it must, for this is one of its deepest characteristics, but it will act in the pattern first established for it unless or until consciousness alters it with a new one. The easiest and most effective way to alter the pattern of action is via the attraction of the substantial forces of the body's mental, emotional, and physical energy up into a closer approximation to the soul. That is, by consciously initiating an upward movement of these forces into the light of understanding, where, from a mental focus, they can be redirected into new patterns of activity. This we call personality integration. All of the substantial forces of the form, which constitute in their sum total, the persona, the mask or face of the soul, are brought into an integrated working unit by those who are consciously focused in their head. The whole being is then enabled to act, rather than to react, in the face of impact, because the response to that impact is impulsed from the soul via the mind, where the light of understanding enables the initiation of right action. Right action proceeds via a rightly integrated and ordered persona from right understanding. Such understanding is never available unless and until the forces of the bodies have been integrated into a personality unit. Consider these forces as the thought life, the emotional life, and the physical life itself, before they are integrated into a unit. Not only are the three aspects often at war with one another, but conflict within one or more aspects very often creates grave difficulties for the human being. If the one consider this concept in the light of quantum physics and the choice point of a superposition. Thought life is divided within itself as to what it wants, or believes, or even knows. It not only becomes impotent in so far as positive accomplishment is concerned, but it becomes destructive to the rest of the instrument and the environment. This applies to the emotional life as well. And when human beings' actions in the physical are contradictory to one another, they defeat their every endeavor, often to the point of insanity. The personality is integrated into a working unit which is responsive to the soul as the individuals take up their residence in the head and identify as soul, and as such, attract these forces up into a focus where the patterns they tend to take can be reevaluated, and the forces redirected into the new patterns created by the reevaluation. Remember, the soul or consciousness aspect initiates a new motion or activity of substance. The substantial forces of the instrument are composed of many millions of particles of substance. As the soul exerts a cyclic, magnetic attraction upon them, they enter a spiral motion. As they orbit around spirit, they move in closer to it, i.e., they lift in vibratory frequency. Thus, as we take up our residence in the head, first in the ajna center between the brows, and identify as soul, we are establishing ourselves in that polarization, which, as mediator between spirit and matter, becomes positive to the substantial forces of the instrument. As we exert a cyclic magnetic attraction upon them every morning in meditation, we are lifted in frequency out of the darkness of the old patterns into the light of understanding. The resulting reevaluations create new patterns of action into which these forces may flow as the consciousness expresses itself outwardly in its environment. The inertia of matter has been overcome to produce a new activity. The life and affairs of such a one take on new meaning as they conform to the new influence, and the human being's life is obviously a positive contribution to the one life. In the next lesson we shall consider a new meditation technique which applies to the above process. In the meantime, try to understand, in so far as is possible, the content of this lesson. Lesson 27. Building an ideal. Transmutation or spiritual alchemy. Visualizing the core of the ideal, the Christ light. A triangle of spiritual force and three characteristics of the new ideal. Divine will, divine love, wisdom, and intelligent activity. The four attributes of the magnetic aura. Divine harmony, concrete science and knowledge. Devotion to an ideal, and divine law and order. Using the ideal as a seed, thought and meditation. 12-month meditation. With what can we identify if not with the form we inhabit? If we are not our thoughts or our emotions or our physical body, if we is not even our name, what, then, are we? The sincere student of truth, at this point, identifies with an ideal that is made up of a group of ideas. The ideal tends to be abstract and vague in the beginning because the ideas are of an abstract nature. The beginning student has yet to learn to think abstractly in concrete form in order to create an adequate ideal that can be clothed in mental, emotional, and physical substance. When we can do so, our new identification ceases to revolve around us as a dream within our wish life and becomes a living reality in the world of affairs. In this way, our dreams come true. They grow from embryonic form into living realities because we have impregnated them with spirit, our own share of the universal will to be. Many students who come this far are frustrated in their attempts to build the ideal. Almost everyone wants to be better than we are at present. Almost everyone consciously or unconsciously seeks higher stature, but few realize how to affect their own growth. The goal is difficult to describe in the mind, and because of this few realize just what to work toward. Self-initiated spiritual growth is something of a new concept to the average person, yet it strikes a definite response from within the very depths of a person's being once its significance is grasped. We immediately set out to formulate an ideal as a goal toward which we may initiate our growth and development. The goal is generally constructed out of an ideal that is the polar opposite of what we appear to be at the given moment. Obviously, if we are filled with resentments, jealousies, greed, etc., we seek to overcome these in the best way we can. Our first ideal is naturally constructed out of vague ideas of love, mercy, kindness, selflessness, and general goodliness. We will endeavor to change because subconsciously we realize that one can affect changes deep within one's own psychology. The average person initiates this particular growth via a self-imposed disciplinary action, and these people are proceeding in the right direction, but usually with wrong methods. Their disciplines are of a negative nature. They will discipline themselves not to resent, not to become jealous, not to permit greed to influence their actions, etc., and in so doing they only succeed in inhibiting the forces generated by these patterns. They are only initiating growing frustration, ill health, or at best a series of unpleasant experiences, because inhibited force builds up its power potential until, eventually, it must find a way out into manifestation. Thus, the usually calm and serene person explodes, panics, or freezes when faced with sudden crisis. Or people simply reach a breaking point when the inhibiting forces within them suddenly break into outer action, and the person is controlled by them. Obviously, there must be another method of attainment by which humankind may safely affect its spiritual growth and development. These negative forces buried deep within each one of us must be transmuted into their polar opposites rather than merely inhibited from expression. Such inhibition is nothing more than a superficial control of a dangerous power potential that must surely move into action via conflict both within the individual and the collective humanity. Ask yourself what is really behind mass violence, criminal behavior, or any act that is destructive of the common good. A small group of humanity playing upon the emotional life of a mass of people may trigger these inhibited negative forces to move the mass into violence against its better judgment. It takes but a small spark to touch off an explosion of such a power potential. Thus, for so long as the potential is presented as a constant threat to our peace and security. Transmutation, or spiritual alchemy, is a science based upon divine facts in nature, which we, as conscious souls, can learn and apply to the betterment of our world. In a very real sense we are, in this series of instruction, dealing with the transmutation process. How do sincere students begin to construct an adequate, well-rounded ideal? We begin first with the very core of the ideal, identification. What is the identity of this new being we intend to become? What are its name and its place in the scheme of things? Its name is Christ, Son of God. You are a child Christ, a young soul born as a unit within the one life, born of spirit and matter into the human family. This core is visualized as a tiny point of brilliant light, deep within the self, which will, as it grows, develops, and matures, infuse the threefold personality with its radiant light. Via this light, the light of the Christ focused within the heart of each soul, the negative forces of the personality, the environment, and finally of the world are transmuted into their polar opposites. Thus, whenever the student thinks of identity, the student does so in this way. This one realizes itself in essence, as a focal point of blue-white Christ light and life within a sphere of consciousness called the soul. The growth of this point of light and life, into a radiating blue-white sun that infuses and finally consumes the personality, symbolizes the spiritual growth this one is initiating. Thus, the core, the identity of the ideal, is established and takes on a comprehensible form. This can be worked toward as a goal of spiritual achievement. The next step in the construction of the ideal is the formulation of a basic foundational nature for the new identity. New ideas have to be formulated which will serve as the blueprint after which is patterned a positive disciplinary program for the persona. What are the basic characteristics of the spiritual being the student intends to become? They are 3 in number, 3 characteristics which form a triangle of spiritual force about the central core of Christ light. They are: 1. Divine will. This is the first point of the triangle. Divine will is inherited by the Son from the Father. It overshadows and infuses him from above and directly aligns him with the Father. Divine will works out in the inner being of the persona as it, divine will, infuses the threefold nature, mental, emotional, and physical, of that persona, as the will to good. It is expressed outwardly in the world of affairs as goodwill toward all members of the human family. 2. Divine love wisdom. This is the second point of the triangle, located below and to the right of the first point. Divine will. Divine love wisdom. Divine love is the basic nature and therefore the essential characteristic of the Son himself, created by the interplay of divine force between his divine parents. It constitutes his at-one-ment with all other human life. Divine love wisdom works out as right understanding or empathy or altruism in the innermost nature of the persona as it infuses that persona. It is expressed outwardly as brotherhood, and constitutes the quality of his actions as well as the reason for them. 3. Intelligent activity. This is the third point of the triangle located below and slightly to the left of the first 2 points. Divine will. Divine love wisdom. Intelligent activity. Intelligent activity is inherited by the Son from the Mother. It underlies and substantiates him, giving him appearance or form. Intelligent activity works out as the creative imagination, the ability to formulate ideas into plans, in the innermost nature of the threefold persona as it infuses that persona. It is expressed outwardly as right action in the life and affairs of the persona. We have now the basic structure of the ideal, a point of Christ light and life within a triangle of spiritual force, that triangle constituting the basic characteristics of the ideal. The next step is the rounding out of the essential identity and its characteristics into a whole being. To do this we have but to add the 4 attributes that form the magnetic aura of the spiritual soul, or ideal. These attributes are: 1. Divine harmony. All of the tones of the persona have been tuned to the pure tone of the Christ, and harmony prevails in the auric influence of the whole being. They are in tune with the one life. The effects they create in the world of affairs are in harmony with the spiritual growth and development, the divine plan, of humanity. 2. Concrete science and knowledge. The forms within their magnetic aura are patterned after the divine facts in nature. They are rational, reasonable, positive, and constructive. They are the application of the basic characteristics found in the triangle of spiritual force in the daily affairs of the persona. 3. Devotion to an ideal. The magnetic aura is aspirational in nature. It devotes its attractive force to that which is of spiritual import, and is thus constantly filled to overflowing with the life of the spirit. 4. Divine law and order. All forms within the magnetic aura are attracted into right relationship with one another in the one life so that order prevails throughout the system of the whole entity. The Son of God lives according to divine law, therefore, manifesting via his auric influence, divine order, within the life and affairs of those whom he contacts. The ideal is now formulated. Sincere students know what it is they wish to become. They comprehend in degree the goal of spiritual growth and development they are initiating. They have only to relate the abstract ideal to concrete form, to step it down into a planned activity that will enable them to embody it. This they do via meditation, application, and reflection. The ideal is used as a seed thought in meditation. Students dwell upon it, endeavoring to fix it firmly within their mind until it becomes positive to all other thought forms they have ever entertained about themselves. In this way the substantial forces of the persona are lifted up into a higher frequency, because the seed thought, as it becomes positively polarized, exerts a magnetic influence upon them. As they are lifted up out of the frequencies of the old negative patterns, they are impressed with new patterns dictated by the newly polarized identity, and the old forms die through lack of use. Thus, the transmutation process, or spiritual alchemy of the personality, form nature, and the whole being is affected, and they are reborn into the divine life. The negative forces are no longer inhibited as a dangerous power potential for destruction, but are cleaned out and transformed into power for good. The new meditation, which should be used for at least 12 months, with a new seed thought each month, is as follows. 1. Become physically relaxed and comfortable, in a sitting position. 2. Become emotionally calm and serene. 3. Become mentally poised and alert. 4. Focus the consciousness in the ajna center between the brows and concentrate for a few moments upon the following. I am mentally polarized. I am integrating the substantial forces of my threefold personality into aspiration to my ideal of the Son of God. 5. Turn the attention to, visualize, a point of blue-white light in the very center of the head bounded by a triangle of spiritual force. The top point of the triangle is located at the top of the head, the second point at the ajna center between the brows, and the third point is located outside and to the back of the neck. Visualize a radiating sphere of golden light from the central point, which is its magnetic aura in the world of affairs. Contemplate from 3 to 5 minutes on the meaning of this symbol as follows. The Son of God is a focal point of Christ life. That life is characterized by divine will, divine love, wisdom, and intelligent activity. Its auric attributes are harmony, concrete science and knowledge, devotion to the spiritual ideal, and divine law and order. I am that life. 6. Then meditate upon one of the formulated seed thoughts given at the end of this lesson from 5 to 10 minutes. As you contemplate the seed thought, endeavor to relate it to your own immediate life and affairs, as planned right action. 7. Turn your attention to the mind nature and repeat, audibly if possible. My mind is infused with the light of Christ, made clear and vivid by that light and transmuted into an instrument of service to the one life. 8. Turn your attention to the emotional nature and repeat, audibly if possible. My emotional nature is infused with the love of Christ, made calm and still by that love, and transmuted into an instrument of peace within the one life. 9. Turn your attention to the physical instrument via the brain and nervous system and repeat, audibly if possible. My physical brain is infused with the creative imagination of the Christ, all of the life of the physical is infused with the right action of the Christ, and transmuted into the temple of the one life. 10. Turn your attention to your immediate environment and repeat, audibly if possible. My environment is infused with the divine attributes of the Christ to manifest divine adjustment in my life and affairs to the divine plan for humanity. 11. Write a report of your meditation results. During the day, endeavor to embody your realizations via your application of them in the daily routine. At the end of the day, reread your morning meditation report and reflect upon your day. How much of the ideal did you embody? Wherein did you fail? Keep a record of these reflections as well as of the meditations, and in this, your spiritual diary, you will have a record of your growth, which can be of tremendous value at a later date. Meditation seed thoughts for 12 months. Use each seed thought, beginning with the first, for a period of 1 month. First month. I, the soul, have purpose, power, and will. I infuse my personality with the will to good. I express that will to good outwardly as goodwill toward my brothers. Second month. I, the soul, have wisdom, compassion, and love. I infuse my personality with right understanding. I express that understanding outwardly as brotherhood. Third month. I, the soul, know right action. I infuse my personality with that knowledge and express it outwardly as an intelligently planned activity of living. I am creative. Fourth month. I, the soul, sound the note of harmony throughout my personality and its environment. That note transmutes all conflicts it touches into harmony with God's plan on earth. Fifth month. I, the soul, am the equation between spirit and matter. I infuse my personality and its environment with the divine facts in nature, and transmute the form nature into a vehicle of service. Sixth month. I, the soul, am devoted to the one life. I infuse my personality with the love of humanity, and express that love in my environment. Seventh month. I, the soul, know and live under the law of God. By that law I restore order out of chaos. Eighth month. I, the soul, discipline my form nature to reflect the light, love, and right action of the Christ. Ninth month. I, the soul, open the door of initiation and take the personality into the presence of Christ. 10th month. I, the soul, sacrifice the personality claims upon my threefold instrument to the power of God, and learn the ways of Christ. 11th month. I, the soul, mount the cross and take my place upon the path of discipleship. 12th month. I am the soul here and now. Lesson 28. The three planes of vibrating matter. The third or etheric plane. The reflective